commanding voice rang out, ordering the group to assume their battle positions, and emphasizing that they must overcome the enormous beast before the day ended. One of the fighters, his face twisted with anger, demanded to know the monster's location. Before he could get an answer, another person urgently warned him that the creature was standing directly behind him. Overwhelmed by fear and surprise, the fighter spun around to face whatever was lurking at his back. At a pivotal point, a new warrior suddenly arrived, delivering a powerful sword blow to the monster. The first fighter who had been in peril, and their companion could only watch in shock and disbelief. The first fighter looked at the newcomer with a sense of recognition, questioning him silently, while nearby, a white-haired elf stared in astonishment, puzzled about the reason behind the fighter's arrival. Once the conflict was over, the elf approached the one who had come to his aid, his heart full of appreciation. He struggled to find the right words to show how grateful he felt, admitting that he was unsure how to repay such kindness. The elf also expressed regret for any difficulties he might have caused before, and acknowledged that his rescuer had not only saved his life, but also safeguarded the harmony of their entire tribe. He promised himself that this act of kindness would remain in his memory forever. A notification from the system appeared, announcing the player's initial accomplishment. As an outsider who had earned an elf's trust, he was now permitted to travel freely within the lands inhabited by elves. The elf mentioned that his little sister wanted to share something with the fighter as well. His sister moved closer and recalled how she had once asked him to join her as her companion. The character earns a new accomplishment, receiving the title, an outsider who gained an elf as a companion, which grants him the ability to use gear designed for elves. The elf maiden accepted his proposal, expressing her own desire for the same, though she hesitated before softly adding the final word. The scene then transitioned to a vibrant and celebratory wedding ceremony. The bride and groom joined in the festivities, surrounded by the joyful applause of everyone present. The fighter and the elf maiden placed rings on each other's fingers, sealing their bond, and then shared a heartfelt kiss. A notification popped up, celebrating the player's unique accomplishment as the first outsider to wed an elf woman. However, before the message could finish, a commanding voice cut through, demanding the announcement be halted. The setting shifts dramatically to reveal a man positioned on a stage before a crowd. He explains to the audience that he has devoted numerous hours to contemplating the best way to share the message he is about to deliver. The man explains that Ares should not be seen as an ordinary game. Instead, every character within it possesses artificial intelligence, granting them the ability to choose their own actions and behave according to unique personalities. He portrays Ares as an entirely separate world. The crowd sits in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock, as someone in the group wonders aloud whether the scene unfolding before them truly came from actual gameplay. The presentation moves forward, emphasizing that Ares offers more than mere realism. It highlights how Purim Lighted has crafted an entirely new universe. A remarkable artificial intelligence had been developed, giving rise to a godlike entity. This being assessed individuals directly and had the power to reward them with extraordinary skills, depending on what they had accomplished. The speaker states that anyone who is granted a revelation from the god of Ares will acquire unique abilities and has the potential to rise as a hero. Some even chose to gather their own followers, seeking to rise to power and govern like royalty. In summary, anything that people can accomplish in real life, and even feats that are impossible outside, can be done within Ares. One attendee feels uncertain about the truth of what has been presented, yet finds himself eager to experience the game firsthand, drawn in by its impressive quality. Excitement swept through the crowd as they called out Mr. Lee Si-jin's name, eager to learn how to make a purchase and expressing their desire to get started right away. In the year 2045, a message revealed that the creation of the game Ares sparked an overwhelming response, influencing not just the world of gaming, but transforming global culture as a whole. The number of users quickly soared past 1 billion. 1 year afterwards, a newcomer entered the game, marveling at how much more lifelike it was compared to what he had been told. A different player revealed his genuine respect, remarking that the whole experience resembled an authentic adventure through the novice area. A player comes to understand that the physical strengths and skills someone has in reality are mirrored within the game's world. A player gestures toward a sight ahead, prompting his companion to focus on what lies before them. The scene referenced a challenge that had existed in the game since its very beginning, where participants attempted to break a wooden dummy. Rumor had it that 1.2 billion players had tried their luck, yet none had ever succeeded. Rumors circulated among the players that anyone who managed to conquer the wooden dummy challenge would receive not only a rare Ares game capsule valued at 50 million won, but also a boost of 5 points to every one of their stats. The task appeared straightforward, needing just 10 hits to complete. Recently, fewer people had stepped forward to take on the challenge. Most believed it couldn't be accomplished, especially after several top national athletes had tried and failed. Even the celebrated gold medalist had been unable to succeed, which only strengthened the belief that the task was impossible. Because of this, people discussed the challenge at length, yet the players remained together, none making a move to attempt it. Everyone waited in anticipation for the one who represented humanity's last and greatest hope to finally appear. Without warning, someone in the crowd called out for the others to step aside. As the people parted, a large and muscular man named emerged. Known as the mightiest among humans, his presence caught everyone off guard, leaving the spectators astonished. Noticed the wooden dummy, and remarked that it was the very one had not been able to destroy. His towering stature led many to believe he belonged to a different kind of people, and whispers circulated that he possessed the strength to overpower a bear using only his hands. The man's towering presence loomed over the wooden dummy, causing it to appear tiny in comparison. Observers began to wonder if he would destroy the dummy before finishing all 10 strikes. Declared his intention to claim the valuable capsule as his own, and then struck the dummy with a powerful hit. The audience burst into enthusiastic applause as the wooden dummy slid far across the floor from the powerful strike, their excitement growing as they speculated whether a contestant might finally achieve victory. At the same time, in a different location, 2 developers observed the unfolding situation. One developer silently wished for his plan to work, hoping that the constant stream of protest calls would finally come to an end. His coworker appeared anxious, expressing concern that if this individual did not succeed following's failure, it could result in significant chaos. Ares's coworker pointed out that the following day's newspapers would accuse their company of inventing an unachievable challenge just to gain publicity, and that Ares seemed fixated on drawing in more users and increasing profits. The employee realized that failure on his part would force them to take the extraordinary step of intervening with the Ares system, something that had never been done before. His coworker questioned whether the CEO would agree to those terms, but she remained firm, declaring that he was responsible as the leader to make it happen and warning that she would quit if he failed. Once he returned to the game, a notification flashed across the display, announcing that the quest had not been completed and urging him to attempt it again. Stood frozen in disbelief, struggling to accept his failure. Inside the office, the team leader pressed his hand against his face, his expression filled with hopelessness as he admitted their situation had become difficult. His coworker advised that they should leave in a hurry before the chants from the protest began, then playfully offered to buy him dinner. Just then, a different staff member approached and informed the team leader that someone new was ready to take on the challenge. The team leader, showing little emotion, questioned whether his appearance suggested he would achieve success. In response, the employee noted that the newcomer was dressed in the standard equipment provided to every player at the start of their journey. He noticed that the weapon resembled one typically purchased from the cash shop, yet he also remembered that numerous players who depended on those kinds of items had already met defeat. The employee expressed regret for making an unnecessary comment, yet the team leader comforted him by admitting that he himself had also experienced hopeful moments in the past. He chose to leave for dinner, planning to return after his meal. Just as he began to walk away, both he and his coworker were startled by a sharp, unexpected noise, leaving them both amazed and curious about its source. The noise came from the new challenger as they struck the wooden dummy with tremendous force. Soon after, a worldwide announcement was displayed, offering him congratulations. Messages soon appeared, declaring that he had become the first player to break the wooden dummy, earning an increase of 5 points in every stat and gaining 200 fame points. Both the team leader and his coworker froze in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the events that had just unfolded. Speculation grew about the identity of this talented player, particularly after their final chance had failed. Suddenly, the team leader came to a stunning realization. The person who had saved them was probably simply a regular individual. Inside the office, The team leader, clearly shocked, instructed his coworker to check the ranking of the sword that the challenger had wielded. The employee pointed out that the search results seemed unusual, but the team leader assured him that such outcomes were typical, adding that it would actually be odd if things had turned out differently. She proceeded to share more information, telling them that the sword, which had the name provided, was classified as epic grade. Its attack power reached 143, and it remained completely undamaged. However, only those at level 40 or above could use it, while there were no limits placed on who could have crafted the weapon. The team leader couldn't believe it when he learned that the sword was classified as epic. She started to question who this enigmatic man could be and what his real intentions were. The setting transforms into what appears to be a memory or a dream, filled with the resonant sound of metal striking metal inside a dimly lit blacksmith's forge. The main character recalls the intense flames so hot that they seem to pull every drop of sweat from his skin. He notices a picture showing his father laboring diligently beside the furnace. Within the dream, the young man gazes down at his weary hands before shifting his eyes to his father, silently conveying that he has come back. The young man wrapped his arms around his father, silently promising to keep him safe. The pleasant dream suddenly shifted, morphing into a scene filled with terror and dread. The young man arrives to see his father trapped within a circle of raging fire, his cries echoing in desperation as the searing heat engulfs him. The boy cries out in fear, desperately pleading with his father to leave the flames and urging him to run to safety. The young man jolted awake, breathless and teary-eyed, as the realization struck him that the recurring dream had visited him once more. The story transitions to reality, setting the scene in the bustling lobby of a hospital located in Seoul, South Korea. At that spot, a young man known as Hoon found himself reflecting on those who continued to believe they could shatter the wooden dummy. He recognized the irony in their hope, understanding that brute force by itself would never be enough to accomplish such a feat. His friend, clearly irritated, cut him off and reminded him that he had specifically requested not to be contacted during the daytime. Hoon explained his actions, mentioning that his job prevented him from meeting in the evening. He also pointed out that he wasn't even allowed into his father's hospital room. Hoon's friends let out a sigh before inquiring about his needs, while Hoon observed his friend's thick clothing and wondered aloud if he was feeling too warm. Hoon's friend shot him a menacing glare, silently warning him of the consequences, which prompted Hoon to quickly offer an apology. Hoon quickly shifts the conversation, wanting to know if his friend is familiar with a game called Ares. He describes how the game is currently the most popular, known for its advanced artificial intelligence, and mentions a unique event designed specifically for newcomers. He mentions that, so far, nobody has managed to win the event. Well-known celebrities have also attempted it and come up short. Still, he points out that the reward for completing the challenge is a VVIP gaming capsule valued at 50 million won. His friend responds with a calm demeanor, expressing doubt about the usefulness of making an attempt when so many others have already failed, and mentions that he does not play video games at all. Hoon acknowledges the challenge ahead, yet maintains confidence that achieving it remains within reach. He goes on to suggest to his friend that he might actually succeed in breaking the wooden dummy, leaving his friend feeling confused. Hoon led his friend to a location filled with gaming capsules. He unveiled a standard Ares gaming capsule that he had arranged especially for his friend, mentioning its impressive price tag of $10,001,000. This revelation left Hoon utterly astonished. Hoon's friend remarked on the high cost of the game, expressing surprise that 1 billion people still chose to play it. In response, Hoon confidently assured him that the experience was well worth the money spent. He explains that when things work out, players have the chance to earn incredible prizes and can even exchange them for actual money, making the platform extremely popular among everyone. After wrapping up his explanation, Hoon proposed that they head inside, admitting that he had already experimented with the game on his own. Hoon's friend grew curious about where the costly gaming capsule had come from, but Hoon paid no attention to the inquiry. Instead, he pressed his friend to consider the huge profits they could make with it. His friend appeared skeptical, expressing uncertainty about any promise of making money, and suggesting that the idea seemed unreasonable. Hoon passionately stood by his proposal, arguing that it represented a valuable investment, and firmly believing that he truly had an opportunity for success. His friend insists on knowing the reason behind what he claims is an opportunity. Hoon discloses the source of his self-assurance, pointing to the presence of the blacksmith class within the game areas. He proceeded to call his friend, thereby unveiling that he was, in fact, the sole heir to a globally acclaimed master craftsman. Hoon, recognized as the only successor, found himself puzzled by the idea that a simple wooden mannequin could ever be a real test for someone as talented as. Took off his hat, exposing the scars that marked his face. He explained to his friend that ever since the accident, his real appearance had remained hidden from view. He explains that this is where he stands at the moment, openly acknowledging that he isn't ready to make any attempts right now. Flashes of the past reveal a devastating scene, a huge blaze that caused a terrible accident. Recalled dashing through the burning inferno, his voice echoing as he desperately called out for his father. Making every effort to rouse him, she struggled to pull him away from the spreading flames. Reflected on the devastating accident that had stripped him of everything he held dear. Though he managed to cling to life, his father remained unresponsive, never waking again. His family lacked the money needed to pay for his overwhelming medical expenses. Had no choice but to endure exhausting physical labor at demanding jobs. For a decade, he had followed the same path as his father, and now memories of the hammer that had shaped endless pieces of metal came flooding back to him. Even that job had faded into history now. He was no longer capable of doing that. Told his friend that ever since the accident, his right arm had lost its strength, which made any kind of manual work challenging and nearly impossible for him to continue as a blacksmith. He assures the other person that he can handle his own issues, though he is grateful for the offer of assistance. He demanded the capsule back, mocking the other person for squandering over $10 billion, and walked away, mentioning that he needed to head to his part-time job. Hoon raised his voice, accusing the other boy of being the true fool. He went on to expose his awareness of the boy's tough money problems and the monthly challenges he faced paying for his father's hospital care. Hoon questioned aloud how much longer the boy could keep living this way. Hoon pressed on with the confrontation, questioning the other person about his past and what lies ahead. He challenged whether the injured man planned to remain in his damaged state forever, firmly believing that this game held the power to change everything. He points out that the total expense for the treatment reaches nearly $3.1 billion, an almost unimaginable sum, yet insists that this staggering figure is no reason to lose hope. Hoon recalled his former excitement and lifelong ambition to become a blacksmith, then passionately declared that reaching this dream was possible within the game areas. Hoon promised to make up for the missing 10 million won and pleaded desperately for a chance to be heard. He earnestly begs for a single chance, assuring that he will not ask again if this attempt is made. His thoughts flickered back to the haunting image of flames and his father, helplessly caught within them. He stood in silence, his gaze fixed on his right hand as it shook weakly. The setting transitions to a construction site, marking the place where his tasks are meant to start. At the construction site, struggled to concentrate on his tasks, his mind distracted by thoughts he believed Hoon had planted there without any real purpose. He reminded himself that he needed to move quickly so he could make enough money to pay for his father's medical care. While he continued his work, the sharp sound of metal ringing stirred something deep within him, bringing back strong memories of days gone by. Ultimately, without meaning to, ends up going back to the location where the game capsules are kept. He acknowledged that the noise of clashing metal had drawn him to that spot. His friend's passionate encouragement about pursuing a blacksmith's life and the possibilities that awaited him in Ares lingered in his thoughts. He recalls with warmth the bright flames and the sound of clashing metal that once filled his days. He made up his mind to join the game, promising his father he would experience that sound once more. As he stepped inside, a series of system messages greeted him, introducing him to the realm of Ares and informing him that it was time to begin creating his character. When prompted to select a nickname, decides to use his own name. Once that step is completed, the process of customizing the character gets. Eyes widened in shock as the system abruptly began scanning and evaluating his physique. He soon notices that the scar he received during the accident is now visible on his in-game character as well. Once the analysis concluded, the system inquired whether he wanted to continue using this appearance. Pauses for a brief moment before finally giving his consent. With his decision made, the character creation comes to a close, and the system begins looking for an available server. Upon stepping into the game world, immediately observes two remarkable changes. The scar that once marked his face is now gone, and even more significantly, the power in his right hand has been completely restored. He remembers his friend, Hoon, and comes to the realization that he is now in debt to him for 10 million won. Determined to make things right, he makes up his mind to work diligently until he can pay back every last bit. He soon found himself abruptly transported to an unfamiliar place, arriving in the beginner's zone of the region, where he appeared inside Blacksmith workshop. Upon entering, he discovers an elderly blacksmith laboring over his craft, determinedly promising himself that he will persevere no matter what. Driven by ambition, he set out to create a sword greater than any his rival had ever wielded. The blacksmith hammered the metal with determination, silently hoping his efforts would not be in vain. Intervened with a composed demeanor, pointing out that the blacksmith's approach was incorrect, which took the blacksmith by surprise. The blacksmith, taken aback by the sudden arrival of an unfamiliar person, expressed his confusion and demanded clarification about the stranger's previous words. Observes the blacksmith's technique, noting once again that the method being used does not align with the correct approach. The blacksmith's temper flared as he looked down on, clearly annoyed that a young outsider would dare speak about his craft. He questioned what someone like could understand about forging weapons. In response, calmly pointed out that, with the blacksmith's current methods, he would never be able to produce a sturdy sword. Admitted that, although it wasn't really his place to interfere, he couldn't simply watch the blacksmith put genuine effort into making a fine sword using the incorrect method. The blacksmith let out a dismissive scoff, inwardly questioning whether the young man truly understood the skills he claimed to possess. After considering his options, the blacksmith realizes there is no risk involved and passes the hammer too, inviting him to demonstrate his abilities. He informs him that he intends to observe him carefully, wanting to find out if his abilities truly match his bold attitude. Reflects inwardly, recalling that he had intended to simply request access to the blacksmith's workshop, but now realizes that the current situation could actually benefit him. Shifting his attention to the blacksmith, states that he will agree, but only if one condition is met. The blacksmith stared in shock at state, went on to clarify that, should he demonstrate his abilities, he expected permission to keep the sword he crafted. In exchange, assured the blacksmith that he would witness something impressive, which led the blacksmith to think was being overconfident. The blacksmith let out a hearty laugh, clearly amused by the display of confidence before him. He expressed his appreciation for such boldness, adding that he hoped it would endure. He issued a stern warning too, making it clear that any failure would result in consequences for his overconfidence, and accepted these terms. Lifts the hammer, his mind drifting to the realization that 3 years have gone by. Although he had spoken with conviction earlier, he silently questions whether his abilities remain as sharp as they once were. The moment he begins to hammer the metal, a sense of familiarity washes over him. Confidence surges within as he understands that he is capable of accomplishing the task. Memories of his ailing father and his companion flickered rapidly in his thoughts. With unwavering resolve, he drove himself to work, silently urging others to be patient just a little longer. Forgotten emotions started to resurface within him, triggered by the recognizable sound of metal striking and the intense warmth that spread across his skin. A wave of happiness washes over him as he returns to his familiar environment, discovering that his muscles instinctively recall every movement of his skill. His belief in his ability to achieve success is restored. The elderly blacksmith observed his craft intently, initially dismissing as a poor copycat. However, as he continued watching, he had to acknowledge that technique showed promise and hinted at prior experience. Despite his efforts, the blacksmith is convinced that has reached his limit. He can't understand why he seems so incredibly happy as he works. The blacksmith held the firm conviction that finding pleasure in one's work was meaningless. In his view, only outcomes carried weight in life, and since lacked any exceptional abilities, he was certain the young man would eventually reach an insurmountable barrier. He believed that allowing the attempt had been pointless, convinced that no one in the beginner's zone could possibly possess blacksmithing skills. Out of nowhere, the blacksmith's eyes widen in astonishment as he notices an extraordinary detail forming in the metal under skilled hands. He observes carefully working the steel, watching as she folds, reheats, and tempers it over and over. From her actions, he realizes that she is using a sophisticated process designed to make the metal stronger and remove any flaws. The blacksmith stared in disbelief, amazed that such an easy method had never crossed his mind before. Although doubt lingered, suspecting it could be some kind of deception, he resolved to activate his unique ability to determine the quality of the metal. The findings indicated that the steel's classification had improved, moving from grade D up to grade C. The blacksmith stared in disbelief at the sight before him. He had experience working with grade C steel, but never had he witnessed it improve at such an astonishing speed. The blacksmith acknowledges that words held meaning, yet he remains convinced that this is as far as can go. He feels sure that improving the grade anymore is impossible. He is convinced that using a few simple tactics cannot hide the truth, without any special abilities, is just like him. As the minutes ticked by, the blacksmith observed quietly, eventually giving in to the drowsiness that crept over him. He woke up much later than expected and was startled to find still hard at work, showing no signs of slowing down. Spent the entire night working tirelessly, his concentration never wavering as he pounded away with determination. The blacksmith finds himself puzzled by the young man's seemingly endless energy. As the first light of morning crept over the horizon, completed his task. Suddenly, a fresh evaluation message appeared, declaring, "Steel Grade B." The blacksmith stood frozen in utter disbelief. He finds it hard to imagine that someone could achieve a Grade B without possessing any remarkable abilities. He suddenly realizes that is still continuing, and, startled, he questions whether is trying to achieve an even better score. After working tirelessly through the night, he is left drained, questioning whether he has pushed himself too far. The elderly blacksmith, clearly admiring his abilities, moved closer and volunteered his assistance, prompting to express his gratitude for the kind gesture. Together, they join forces, shaping and refining the rough metal until their task is complete. The blacksmith stared at the finished product with utter amazement. He identified it as a Grade A ingot, the kind needed to forge a rare grade sword, a feat he had never imagined he would achieve. The blacksmith reveals his unique ability to identify the quality of items, remarking that throughout his entire time in the beginner's village, he has never come across a magic grade item, much less one that is considered rare. He eagerly explains that this metal holds the potential to create a truly unique sword. Reminds him that it's not time to celebrate yet, explaining that the handle still needs to be completed and the blade must be polished to an even sharper finish. He clarifies that the sword needs to endure tremendous pressure without snapping, and notes that the blade's edge remains a long way from being flawless. The blacksmith burst into laughter, confessing that was the most unusual person he had ever encountered. In response, explained that his passion for blacksmithing had been with him since childhood. In response, the blacksmith proposes that attempt to forge the sword once more, this time using a different material that he offers. The blacksmith lifts a hefty chunk of ore, its surface shining with a bright, otherworldly light. The character clarified that the object had been in their family for many generations, cherished as a precious heirloom. Wondered aloud about the reason behind receiving such a valuable item, while the blacksmith explained that he owed much of his newfound knowledge to, and admitted that the ore's quality was far greater than what he could handle. He is eager to discover the type of sword a genuine master could forge from it. His excitement grew as he realized he would be working with a legendary metal he had previously only encountered in books and tales. He understood it was a gamble because he had no prior experience using it. He realizes accepting the offer is his only choice. The blacksmith, feeling uneasy, wondered if it would be acceptable to address as master. Rejects the request without hesitation. The blacksmith quickly relented when faced with the possibility that they would go unused if he continued to argue. A month passed. The Forging of Daylight epic had finally been finished. This sword now held incredible strength and unique powers, earning its place as a legendary weapon. In the beginner's zone, people believed that no other sword of such greatness would ever appear again. At the company management center, the developers gathered to discuss the remarkable achievements of a player who had just reached level 1. The team leader remained visibly impressed, yet his coworker quickly reminded him that they needed to focus on their tasks. She expresses her frustration over how little information can be found about the player. He then shared some simple details about himself, His name was, he was 23 years old, and he had logged in from a friend's house. She reveals that she learned this information by reviewing his application for the VVIP capsule prize. She also mentioned that was very insistent about keeping his true identity a secret from others. The developers found themselves puzzled, unable to understand his desire to keep his identity hidden. The team leader decides that the man likely has personal motives for steering clear of attention, and the recognition that is bound to follow him. Inside the management center, the team leader inquires about where is at that moment. His coworker announces that he recently arrived at the hunting training facility. Inside the room, a trainer called welcomed with a scornful attitude, making it clear that the truly fearsome creatures would now begin to show themselves. Also remarked that, given low level, he stood no chance of succeeding in the upcoming challenge. He instructed to go away, suggesting that he should hunt rabbits instead and return only when he felt prepared, so as not to waste his time. Felt certain about his impressive abilities, which remained hidden from the trainer's view, and made it clear that he would not spend his time on unworthy tasks. Let out a weary sigh, clearly uninterested, yet he gave in and told to pick a sword and come along with him. Responds by saying that any sword would be acceptable. He would rather rely on his own resources. The narration explains that remained in the beginner's area for an entire month, even though most people finished it within half an hour, and because of this, his fundamental stats increased tremendously. He owned the region's sole epic grade sword, yet remained both classless and stuck at level 1. At the same time, team leader felt uneasy about the unusual circumstances and questioned whether relying entirely on the advanced AI, Ares, without stepping in themselves was the right choice. A senior executive at the company expresses a similar worry. Despite everything, a confident smile spreads across his face as he realizes that he is about to receive an offer for a legendary class. Returning to the game, felt irritation rising as asked to wield a sword of his own creation. He reflects on how unfortunate it seems that someone would sacrifice their future for what he considers an unworthy trade, such as blacksmithing. As the test commenced, informed everyone that the area was crawling with monsters. It became clear that having skill with a sword mattered far more than relying on a poorly made blade. He questions, with a mocking tone, the reason someone aiming to become a blacksmith would show up in this place, leading to a decline in his rapport with. Recalled witnessing this response frequently in real life, where pursuing a future as a blacksmith was often dismissed as an impractical ambition. He senses that, now in Ares, his hard work might at last receive the recognition he's been hoping for. Wondered aloud, seeking to learn which renowned swordsman had received training from the instructor. Without hesitation, the character requests a challenge even more difficult than the one swordsman faced. Seethed internally, angered by the newcomer's brazen confidence. Despite being merely an instructor, he can easily recognize genuine talent when it appears before him. Feeling challenged by the provocation, decides to offer a unique test. He reveals that these unique challenges are reserved for only those exceptional individuals who demonstrate real potential. He guided the other person to a different section, indicating that so far, no one had surpassed the 3rd stage trial as the top achievement in this place. Called forth a quick-footed goblin with a level of 6, then turned to with a questioning look, seeking confirmation about's choice. He proceeds to announce the consequence for not succeeding, which is a 1-week suspension from the center. Remains unfazed by the warning, and with a composed demeanor, inquires whether the 3rd stage marks the last challenge. Expressed his determination to face every challenge, stating his intention to continue until he reached the very last stage. His temper flared as he became convinced that the young man was disrespecting his training methods and deliberately pushing his patience to the limit. His anger barely contained, accepted the challenge and called forth the monster meant for the 4th and final stage of the trial. A level 15 goblin, wild with madness, suddenly materializes in front of the group. Reflects inwardly, realizing that very few people across the globe have ever succeeded in clearing the 3rd stage. No one had ever managed to get past the 4th. As the battle commenced, the goblin lunged forward with relentless aggression. Despite the creature's relentless assault, evades each strike with agile precision. Believes that every blacksmith has the ability to recognize the hidden strength within a weapon. He triggered the active skill of his sword Daylight, known as Durable Sword, which boosted his physical defense. A tremendous surge of energy bursts forth from the sword. Confidently asserts that none of the weapons present could outmatch his own sword, and with swift skill, he overcomes the agile goblin he had faced in the last stage. Before he could react, a second goblin sprang out from hiding and struck him with tremendous force. Observed that the impact had been both decisive and immediate, explaining why quick-moving goblins often became the worst fear of those new to adventuring. Is convinced that has no chance left. He thinks that even the finest weapon becomes useless in the hands of someone lacking the necessary skill. To his astonishment, withstood the devastating blow, still retaining 82% of his health points. Believed that the countless hours he had dedicated to forging weapons were the key to his survival, as this effort had greatly enhanced his strength and vitality. Announces that the true threat is only just beginning. The Mad Goblin unleashed a unique ability known as the Thorns of Madness. This sudden effect leaves feeling lightheaded, and his surroundings start to lose focus before his eyes. Watched impressive performance, yet he remained convinced that this would be his final moment. The characters believed this confrontation would be the final one, bringing the conflict to a close. Chooses to concentrate, placing his confidence in the weapon he crafted, and commits to using all his strength. He triggers the sword Daylight's hidden ability, Swift Blade, causing his strikes to become much faster than before. Launches into action, delivering a rapid succession of blows. He understood that by doing this, he could catch up to the others in terms of skill. The developers gazed at the unfolding battle, their faces filled with amazement. With one last powerful strike, managed to overcome the last of the goblins. Gazed in awe and happiness, his excitement clear as he proclaimed that this young man had accomplished what everyone else had failed to do. He commended, observing that even though attacks appeared haphazard, each precise movement revealed the sword's real strength. With excitement, he guessed that likely had previous experience in swordsmanship. Shared that his training taught him a blacksmith's duty was simply to manage the weapons he crafted, and nothing beyond that. His gaze lingers on his arms, taking in the defined muscles and scattered scars that reveal the effort and dedication has put into his training. Suddenly understood that he stood before a genuine master blacksmith. Feeling remorseful for his earlier disrespect, he offered a sincere apology, which caused their bond to reach its strongest point. Out of admiration for his abilities, decided to offer him a thoughtful suggestion. She questioned whether he had ever thought about taking on the path of a mad master, and just then, a notification window popped up, presenting him with a quest to change his class to the legendary Mad Master. At the same time, the developers observed the unfolding situation with wide eyes, unable to comprehend that such an irrational occurrence was taking place before them. Suddenly found himself recognized as a second-tier user in need of special oversight, all because he had been offered the rare and powerful Mad Master class, an advanced role that even the renowned Mad Knight class. The team leader shows that he is pleased with the way things have turned out. Despite understanding the consequences, he realizes that agreeing to undertake the class change quest will seal his fate, leaving no possibility of reversal. It was believed that the Mad Master commanded hundreds of knights, which signified that was destined to serve as a guardian of the world. Within the game, encouraged to take the deal, expressing confidence that extraordinary skills could elevate him to the status of a king among knights. Declined the invitation with respect, making it clear that his skills belonged to the forge, not the battlefield. All the players inside the game, as well as the staff monitoring from the management center, react with shock to the choice he makes. Let out a burst of laughter filled with admiration, expressing how impressed he was by his unwavering determination. Reflects inwardly, surprised that he is holding a hammer once more after believing he would never do so again. Within the game, he experienced the sensation of beginning his blacksmithing journey all over again. Agreed with his choice and handed him a letter of recommendation, granting him access to a secret mission that involved meeting the local lord. As a token of success for completing the challenge, he presents with a piece of old, rusted armor that once belonged to a previous Mad Master, expressing his belief that will discover its value. Eagerly urged to show his abilities and accomplish feats that others had failed to achieve, while assured him that he would give it his all. The developers decide that has successfully faced his toughest challenge so far, and they notice that he still holds a glimmer of promise within him. Had set out on his journey, determined to one day claim the title of the god of blacksmithing. The system notifications signaled that the tutorial phase had concluded, and the primary mission was now beginning. The true challenge was only just starting. Before he has the chance to continue, the game unexpectedly forces him to log out. He snapped back to the present, reminding himself of the duties waiting for him, such as taking care of the gas bill. He opens his banking app and discovers that his balance is nearly gone, making it clear that he must focus on covering his father's medical bills and their daily costs. Hoon contacted to find out whether he had completed the training zone, and informed him that he had only just reached the village. Hoon, filled with excitement, urged the other person to go to the auction house before doing anything else. He reveals that this marketplace is a place where goods are traded for gold, and that gold itself can be converted into actual cash. With this confession, he admits that his true motivation for bringing into Ares was tied to this opportunity. Hoon finished his speech, expressing how nothing he had ever witnessed compared to the beauty of the swords crafted by and his father. Hoon spoke to on the phone, offering words of motivation. He assured that after receiving the VVIP capsule with its near-perfect synchronization, the adventures awaiting him would become even more incredible. Hoon urged to share his extraordinary blacksmith creations with the world. Feeling appreciative, expressed his thanks. Once the call ends, senses a newfound clarity about the direction he should take. He chooses to concentrate on making items and completing missions to gather gold, soon understanding that keeping an eye on his energy is essential for success. Begins to work out, coming to the understanding that gaming takes up a significant amount of energy, even if it still falls short of the physical demands required in actual blacksmithing. As he sprinted forward, he silently promised his father that he would persevere and make sure his father would open his eyes once more. Made his way back to Ares and headed straight into the auction house. He decides to call his shop's forge. Stood by patiently while the tool for his shop was being made. Once the system completed the process of establishing the shop, the system allowed him to access the auction panel at any time and from any location. Considered which item he ought to sell before anything else, and then recalled the prototype he had crafted earlier in the workshop. He examined the specifics of his initial sword, recognizing it as a rare-grade weapon. As he reflected, he remembered that swords of this quality typically sold for around 70 gold pieces on the market. He also recalled his friend's warning not to let it go for too low a price. He puts the sword up for sale at a price of 100 gold pieces and plans to check out the village features as he waits for someone to buy it. A notification about the sale reached every player. In another part of the game, a player observed a sudden surge of activity on the auction board, all sparked by a strange and unexpected listing. The price for sword quickly climbed as the bidders competed with increasing enthusiasm. The amount exceeded 300 gold coins. A member of the Golden Shield Guild noticed the remarkable item and hurried off to alert the guild's vice-captain about the discovery. The member reveals that the sword was crafted by a level 1 player who had not chosen a class. Despite using only the simplest materials, this player managed to forge the finest sword, which also includes the ability to be upgraded. The vice-captain carefully examined the circumstances, realizing that enhancing with inferior materials lowered the likelihood of success. This observation led him to conclude that the creator had been resourceful in cutting expenses. He determines that, with minimal resources spent, this weapon could stay reliable and useful until reaching level 50. He observes that the sword, known as the First Sword, holds special value for collectors because of its name, making it an ideal initial addition to any collection. The vice-captain comes to understand that the true reward lies in being recognized as the first to find and acquire a piece from this gifted artisan. With this in mind, the vice-captain chooses to go ahead with the purchase. At the same time, experiences a mix of embarrassment and nervousness as he questions whether anyone would be interested in buying his sword, knowing it was only made for practice. Without warning, a message popped up to reveal that its very first sword had just been purchased. Cannot believe how fast it has already been sold. He reviews the final auction results and is astonished to discover that the item, which he had originally listed for just 100 gold pieces, has sold for an incredible 1,008. He soon understands that the sum equals more than 1 million Korean won, and an overwhelming mix of joy and astonishment washes over him. Soon learns that the Golden Shield Guild is the buyer, and he gets a message from them. In the message, they congratulate him on his achievement and present him with a choice. He can sign an exclusive sales contract with them or become a member of their guild. He began researching the guild and was astonished to find out that it was a huge blacksmithing organization, boasting an impressive following of 780,000 people. Recalled Sidvice, realizing that attracting new followers proved to be a greater challenge than simply increasing his level. It was clear that a high follower count reflected strong user engagement, and this attention often translated directly into financial gain. He glanced at the number of followers for his shop's forge and saw that it remained stuck at just 82. Nevertheless, as he checks his inbox, the inbox overflows with invitations from numerous guilds, all eager for him to become a member. Comes to understand that Ares serves as the destination for the blacksmiths who have been vanishing from the real world. The worth of a craftsman's abilities. The brilliance becomes even more apparent when it is backed by accurate data and concrete figures. Determines that joining a guild can wait, so he makes his way toward the Lord's castle instead. He felt a strong resolve to prove his real value, and he knew that this moment marked the start of his journey. Inside the castle, Lord Vance discussed with his advisor Bell whether restoring the artifact could actually be done, both expressing doubts about its possibility. Bell shares that attempting to restore things comes with the danger of failing, a risk that might mean peace is lost for good. For this reason, Bell insists that they need to seek out the most skilled restoration specialist across the entire continent. Vance noted that the expert could only be found in the capital. Bell agreed, explaining that the man was unusual and refused to meet with anyone, which made it challenging to bring him in. The Lord's heart grew heavy with sorrow as he realized he could not leave his responsibilities behind and travel there in person. The distinctively shaped bow remained as the sole inheritance from his father, making it all the more precious to him. Bell's true identity came to light as a highly skilled scammer, secretly a level 100 player who had been pretending to be a humble blacksmith. For an entire week, Bell had carefully earned the Lord's trust, all as part of a plan to trick him. Bell proposed to the Lord that she could transport the bow to the capital for repairs, requesting a payment of 300 gold pieces for the service. Just as the Lord was about to give his answer, burst into the room unexpectedly. Without hesitation, someone cut into their conversation and boldly announced that the bow could be repaired immediately and right where they stood. Bell simmered with rage internally, realizing that his carefully crafted scheme was on the verge of falling apart. The Lord, clearly astonished, wonders aloud whether truly possesses the ability to fix the charred bow. Within the castle, it could be repaired without the necessity of visiting a blacksmith shop. The Lord instructed a guard to find out who the man was. In response, the guard explained that the man had arrived with a letter of recommendation from instructor. The Lord's expression shifted to one of astonishment upon hearing that the instructor hailed from the beginner training center. The Lord formally requested that share details about his abilities and background. Announced his presence, revealing that his name was, he had just reached level 1, and he currently did not have a designated class. Bell's temper flared as disbelief washed over him. He couldn't fathom how someone as inexperienced as a level 1 player would have the audacity to speak so boldly before the Lord. Bell loudly declared that only blacksmiths who had surpassed level 80 possessed the rare ability to restore items. He blames for disrupting the project he had dedicated an entire week to, then demands that leave immediately. Responded with composure, explaining to Bell that he was incorrect and clarifying that the bow in question was not a recurve bow. Clarified Bell's mistake by informing her that the weapon was actually a traditional Korean composite bow rather than a recurve bow. Both the Lord and Bell exchanged puzzled looks, clearly uncertain about the strange name they had just heard. Informed the Lord that he had learned about the situation from the guard baker. He explained that he understood the Lord wanted to repair his deceased father's charred bow, a treasured present once given by an enigmatic stranger. The Lord acknowledged that the branch was unique, unlike anything ever witnessed in that region before. He reveals his exhaustion from constantly being misled by outsiders who make untrue statements regarding the family heirloom. He gives a firm warning, insisting that should only say things he can back up with evidence. Pauses, wanting to clarify a single detail. She astonished the Lord by proposing that, although the bow was presented by a foreigner, it had truly been crafted in their own country. began to share his reasoning, noting that he had noticed a painting of a water buffalo hanging in the hallway. He remarked that, in his own world, the horns of this animal were regarded as valuable and rare. What drew his gaze most was the elegant curve of the bow. He discloses an important fact. The item was crafted with whale sinew rather than cow sinew. Seeking answers, he turns to the Lord, hoping for clarification. The Lord acknowledged its correctness and clarified that the outsider had been a blacksmith who was once a close companion to his father. That the components came from the area and were uncommon, specifically mentioning enormous water buffalo horns found in the swamps, along with whale sinew sourced from the harbor. Using these valuable resources, the friend crafted and presented his father with the finest bow ever created in all of. The Lord found himself amazed at how managed to catch subtle details that had escaped Bell's notice, despite Bell's reputation as a master blacksmith at level 100. The Lord reveals a deep determination to protect the cherished keepsake left by his father. Impressed by his abilities, the man formally requested that repair the bow. In response, agreed to take on the task, which came with a promised reward of 500 gold pieces. The Lord instructed Bell to withdraw for the time being, prompting Bell to leave with his head lowered in respect. As he moves farther from the scene, anger boils inside him. He swore to get back at for destroying his scheme. The Lord turned to, seeking to know what must be done to repair the bow. Demonstrated his thorough understanding of bow making by naming every essential material, including water buffalo horns, whale sinew, select varieties of wood, and specialized finishing tools, showcasing his expertise in the craft's components. Came into possession of detailed instructions on how to repair the sniper. The guide listed all the required materials and cautioned him that if the chance of success dipped below 70%, the restoration would not only fail, but also destroy the bow completely. His mind filled with memories from his youth, when his father patiently taught him the art of crafting bows. He recalls his father questioning whether his passion for this work was worth the rough, calloused hands it gave him. He expresses his enjoyment of working alongside his father, who assures him that one day, when he is older, he will be taught the skills of blacksmithing. For the time being, he needed to become comfortable working with the raw materials directly, using only his hands. At that moment, his eyes brimming with tears, quietly affirmed his father and reflected on how closely his gaming capsule matched his own abilities. He senses the well-known feeling in his hands and trusts that he can repair the bow flawlessly, following the lessons his father once gave him. Upon witnessing the display of skill and self-assurance, Lord Vance decides to extend his assistance. And Lord Vance put in tireless effort side by side, dedicating both their days and nights to their shared tasks. Focused intently as he carefully carved the wooden segments of the bow. As the Lord fixed his gaze on him, watching with intense focus, the Lord acknowledged the difficulty of laboring from dawn until dusk, feeling his energy slowly slipping away as exhaustion set in. He mentions that witnessing's joyful expression renews his determination to keep going. After spending an entire week feeling worn out, the Lord wonders aloud if he might return home, but firmly tells him he needs to remain and assist with putting up the frame. Speculated that the Lord visited daily because he wanted to personally repair his father's keepsake, and the Lord affirmed this suspicion. The Lord reveals that the bow serves as the sole keepsake left from his father. Afterward, the Lord inquires about the reasons behind his enjoyment of his work. Smiled warmly, recalling that he, too, cherished many fond memories connected to this craft. Both of them understand that bringing back lost memories requires patience and hard work. A series of rapid scenes depicted the team diligently crafting different components of the bow over the course of the following 20 days. At last, the final day comes. The snipers had a full restoration, emerging as a legendary weapon with enhanced stats and abilities that far surpassed what it once had. The Lord gazes up at his father's statue, his mind filled with questions about whether his father is somehow observing him. He reflects on how yet another enigmatic stranger from a distant land has returned this bow to him. Recommended that the Lord test the bow to determine if its feel matched his memories. The Lord pulled back the bowstring and let an arrow fly, sending it speeding forward with tremendous power. He observes with surprise that the sensation is different than before. He suddenly erupted in joyful laughter, expressing that it had grown far beyond its previous state, just as the quest completion message appeared. The system declared that his connection with Lord Vance had reached its highest point, thanks to an extraordinary achievement that surpassed the usual limit of 100%. The Lord expressed his gratitude, too, feeling relieved that he could now fulfill his responsibilities with a calm and untroubled mind. The Lord believes that the compensation offered does not match the significance of such achievements. Due to the remarkable achievement, the quest reward receives an enhancement. Along with receiving 2,000 gold coins, he is also given unlimited access to the blacksmith's workshop by the Lord. His heart soared with happiness when he discovered that the gold was worth 2,000,000 won, an amount that would easily support his needs for a considerable period. The Lord then inquired whether he had ever thought about studying the art of sword fighting. Before taking on the title of Lord of, he had once lived the life of a swordsman. He explains the origins of the first swordsmanship, an ancient and guarded technique from the Prime Kingdom. This secret art once quelled countless monsters and restored peace to the land of. The Lord informed that, while his skills as a blacksmith were undeniable, he also recognized a swordsman's potential within him. He shares that both instructor's endorsement and his own first-hand experiences reassured him of this truth. The Lord began to recount strengths, noting his impressive fitness, sharp reflexes, and thorough understanding of weaponry. Recognizing these qualities, the Lord decided to grant a portion of his own swordsmanship essence. Lord Vance presented with a skill quest, challenging him to begin his initial swordsmanship training. He believed that as long as put in the same effort he had shown in the workshop, he would surely triumph. Saw this training as a surprising opportunity, and before he knew it, a hectic month had gone by. Throughout the month, devoted his time to building a bow from scratch and refurbishing the old, corroded armor. He also participated in rigorous training sessions. He remained there, exchanging practice blows with Lord Vance. The initial swordsmanship training session concluded with success. As the moment to depart arrived, informed the Lord that he felt completely ready. Clad in his newly repaired armor and armed with a freshly crafted bow, he shares his intention to pursue a fitting profession as his next goal. After saying goodbye to the Lord, who warmly lets him know that he can visit whenever he wishes, chooses to gather and arrange his things before leaving. He examined his recently acquired gear, the Mad Master armor, appreciating how its damage reflection ability helped offset his low rank. Alongside it, he checked out the new bow, which boasted a notable 60% improvement in accuracy. In order to manage his costs, he had designed a few uncommon bows and listed them at the auction house for others to purchase. Examined the listed price for second bow. In another location, an individual observed the auction, unable to believe what was unfolding. He noticed that even Black, the top player in Korea, had never made a bow of this caliber when he was just level 10. Amazed, he wondered how could create such an impressive bow at level 1, especially using only basic materials. Ron, the leader of the Golden Shield Guild, remembered how Smith, the top blacksmith in the world, had once told him that Ares was the one who determined everything within the game. It was explained that when the AI known as Ares observed a player performing exceptionally, it would reward them by assigning an appropriate profession, skill, or title. Ron came to the realization that someone capable of creating artifacts of such high quality must be in charge of his workshop. The narrator realized that he likely possessed a legendary class title, similar to the one Smith held. Stared in disbelief as the final bid for his bow soared to 2,050 gold pieces, which amounted to an astonishing 2,001,000, far more than he ever thought possible for a weapon in the game. He observes that his number of followers has risen to 3,200, and the sheer volume of guild invitations and crafting requests overwhelms him to the point where he can't keep up with them all. Believes the time has come for him to begin his journey. He chose his next stop, the legendary Tower of Blacksmiths, renowned as the sacred place for master craftsmen. He journeys across breathtaking and picturesque scenery. He continues forward, not stopping until he arrives at the base of the immense building. Up close, the sheer grandeur leaves them completely amazed. He discovers that the entrance is blocked by a mystical barrier wrapped in chains, leaving him puzzled about how he might gain access. A message suddenly appeared before him, informing him that he stood in the tower belonging to the sword maker. It revealed that if he wished to become a blacksmith, he needed to shatter the seal using a sword created in the enchanted workshop. Inspects the seal closely, and discovers that it has been crafted from volcanic basalt rock. He soon comes across the doorway leading into the magic workshop. The character steps inside to start the necessary training for the upcoming test. Inside the magic workshop, discovers how things work. He realizes that there is an endless supply of materials and tools at his disposal. The process of crafting is much faster than usual. However, he also finds out that any swords created in this place are meant solely for use during the test. Reflected on the challenge ahead, realizing that breaking the stone seal with a sword was designed to assess only his skill in crafting. The focus was on forging a blade strong enough to slice through solid rock. In another part of the tower, Ding, who presides as the master of the tower grumbled under his breath, his irritation directed at those he considered useless incompetents. He expresses frustration that every visitor is solely interested in learning fast ways to earn money. They cared only about making cheap goods with their skills just to sell them, showing no appreciation for the true craftsmanship happening in the workshop. Ding mournfully reflects that the genuine way of the blacksmith has vanished, replaced by a world where people care only about wealth. Because he felt so hopeless, he let anyone who claimed to want the blacksmith title breeze through an easy test, fully aware that their attempts were shallow and lacked real dedication. They would remain unable to unlock the true seal. They would be lucky to leave even a small mark on it. Ding believed the task could never be accomplished, but made up his mind to forge a Damascus sword. The system informed him that only skilled blacksmiths could craft such a sword, and suggested he begin with a basic iron dagger instead. Remains determined to give it a shot, convinced that with the right technique and endless resources, he at least has a chance to attempt it. He recalls his father explaining that a sword has the power to slice through stone, and promising to teach him a unique forging technique that he had invented on his own. Motivated by the lessons his father had shared with him, he believed he was fully prepared to complete the challenge ahead. His eyes lit up with excitement as he realized the opportunities laid out before him. He now had access to flawless smelting facilities and top-notch equipment, an endless reserve of ores, and the ability to produce goods in record time. He considered the game to be absolutely wild, throwing himself into the project with unmatched excitement and dedication. At the same time, Ding was jolted awake by an intense shaking that disrupted his sleep. He tries to figure out where the shaking is coming from. He becomes aware that the whole tower is trembling, because an individual was pounding with tremendous strength. Ding hurried over to find out what was going on. He stands in disbelief as he discovers the once unbreakable sealed stone, now broken cleanly in two. Ding is left without words, unable to speak. He notices, entering through the open doorway with a composed demeanor. Ding gazed in astonishment, convinced that the legendary god of blacksmithing had at last revealed himself. Walked up to him and wanted to know whether he had managed to pass the test. Ding explained that their usual method for judging ability involved examining the mark a sword left on the stone. However, because had shattered the stone entirely, there was nothing left for them to assess. Questioned whether this signaled the need for another test, just as a luminous magic circle suddenly formed beneath his feet. Ding explained that the pattern was actually a summoning circle, not a magic circle as some might have thought. The tower master named Ding offered his unique hammer to as a gift. Puzzled by the situation, takes the item and soon sees a system notification appear, letting him know that he now possesses Ding's hammer. A fresh SS rank quest was about to start, and Ding informed him that a genuine challenge now awaited him. He offered his hopes for prosperity in his role as the deity overseeing blacksmiths. Found himself abruptly whisked away to a completely unfamiliar location. Stood atop the castle walls, bewildered by his abrupt arrival and questioning whether he was facing yet another trial. He witnesses a massive force of orcs marching toward the castle, their sudden approach catching him completely off guard. An SS-ranked quest emerged, tasking him with overcoming the formidable orc army. The discovery leaves him bewildered, as he cannot figure out how it relates to a task involving blacksmithing. The warriors stationed atop the wall spotted his approach and erupted into cheers, celebrating the arrival of support sent by the master blacksmith. The requirements for finishing the mission were now understood. He needed to secure a 70% contribution rate among the 50 gathered fighters. Hans, the suppression squad's captain and a warrior of level 48, greets him with a welcoming gesture. Hans reports that the orc attacks have become more intense, noting that much of their gear has been destroyed in the fighting. He urges to put his abilities to use and fix the damaged equipment as soon as possible. Attempted to clear up the confusion, explaining that he had not switched his class to Blacksmith and still lacked any abilities. Hans stared at the hammer in his hand, confusion written across his face as he tried to understand why he was holding it. Still bewildered, shared that he had received the item during a class change test and had been brought to this place for another assessment. When questioned about his fighting background, he openly reveals that he has no real experience and is just starting to learn how to fight. The soldiers felt let down, having hoped for reinforcements, but instead receiving a newcomer who required their safeguarding. Hans instructed to remain in the watchtower for his own protection until they came back. Without warning, an orc hurled a massive axe in Hans's direction. Darted toward Han, skillfully deflecting the axe as if it required little effort. He then inquires whether Hans would allow him to participate in the battle, even though he is still inexperienced. Suddenly understands that this moment is the actual challenge, while Hans glances at him with a puzzled expression. He believes that as long as he battles with the same determination he showed against the goblins, things will turn out well. Hans nodded in agreement and instructed him to join the squad led by Ben. Hans surged forward at the front lines, boldly leading the charge into battle. Is suddenly overwhelmed by the intense force of a genuine fight, realizing it is nothing like his previous encounters with goblins. Despite the circumstances, he remains certain of his victory. Confronted the orcs, demonstrating impressive combat expertise. After managing to overcome a formidable level 10 orc, he watched as his own level increased to 2, feeling a surge of satisfaction as he understood that his month of hard training had finally paid off. Ben stared in astonishment, struggling to comprehend how someone without a class could possess such remarkable strength. Amidst the chaos of the fight, Ben, a soldier, realizes that his safety is at serious risk. Quickly assesses what's happening around him, then decides to swap out his current weapon for his traditional Korean bow. He releases an arrow that blazes with intense light and force. A powerful force sliced across the chaos of the battlefield, striking the orc squarely in the chest. At the very last second, someone managed to rescue Ben, but just as relief settled in, a second orc emerged unexpectedly from behind him. Struck the target with impressive skill, causing his level to increase multiple times as a consequence. The soldiers stared in disbelief, amazed that just one arrow had been enough to defeat the enormous orc. Hans raised his voice at Ben, trying to jolt him from his stunned state, and urgently alerted him that the orcs had shifted their focus to and were now launching an attack against him. Ben's conscience weighed heavily on him, as he understood that his predicament was a direct result of his own actions. He holds himself responsible for having lost concentration during the fight. Now encircled by his opponents, reverts to using his daylight sword and activates the rampage skill, unleashing its full power. The ability unleashed a chaotic assault on every foe standing within a 10-meter circle, causing numerous orcs to fall in battle. His level increased once more, and his efforts now accounted for 19% of the mission's progress. Hans, the squad leader, feels a surge of happiness as he understands the wisdom behind the old master's decision to send. With now part of the team, Hans believes they finally have a chance to accomplish what once seemed impossible. Hans gazed at with genuine respect, recognizing both his intelligence and the remarkable resilience he had shown. Hans filled with excitement, his troops by announcing that alongside they would destroy the orc army that day. Sensed a genuine connection to the group when the system revealed that his actions had raised the spirits of the other soldiers. Pressed on with determination in the battle, steadily increasing his share of the effort until it reached 28%. Despite slaying orcs at a rate unmatched by others, he can't help but notice that his contribution percentage remains lower than anticipated. Just then, an unexpected hidden quest suddenly appears. A powerful foe appeared, marking the start of an extraordinary and unexpected chapter. A level 51 orc warrior suddenly emerged, prompting Hans to urgently call for everyone around him to halt. Hans immediately identifies the foe, realizing that the adversary they had never been able to conquer has now made an appearance. The soldiers recognized him as their greatest foe, and fear quickly rippled through their ranks. Hans suddenly understood that he had made a serious error. He and his group had advanced too deeply into the battle and now found themselves completely surrounded. Even though the circumstances were grave, his soldiers expressed unwavering determination, making it clear through their actions that they were prepared to battle until the very end. Ben sided with the others, raising his voice to declare that they would stand their ground and never fall back. Hans realized that their current situation was unsustainable, so he commanded his forces to launch an attack. Observes that the soldiers, no longer calm, are now charging forward in a disorganized and frantic manner. He attempted to shield his companions using his bow, yet was taken aback as his arrows merely glanced off the orc warrior's sturdy armor. They soon understood that breaking through its defenses was impossible. His bow offered enhancements that boosted both its piercing power and its precision. He realizes that the orc warrior's skin is as hard as armor, so using just his bow won't be enough to hurt it. Desperation swept through the ranks of soldiers, with uncertainty rising as some questioned whether retreat was their only option. However, Hans raised his voice above the chaos, insisting that falling back was no longer possible. The orc warrior lunged forward with ferocious speed, and without much effort severed Hans' hand from his arm. Hans understood that, with the power he currently possessed, overcoming the orc would not be possible. Witnessed hand collapse onto the ground, his body stained with blood. Raised his voice, calling out Hans's name in hopes of getting the leader's attention. The sound of the orc's thunderous roars sent waves of dread through the ranks of the soldiers. A desperate soldier shouted about his helplessness, realizing that nothing he tried could penetrate their armor. Another individual fears that none of them will survive. Stepped forward and addressed the soldiers, raising his voice to warn them that persisting with their current approach would only result in further casualties. He then commanded everyone to regroup and create a solid defensive formation. He instructs the group to fall back swiftly into the woods behind them, promising he will join them shortly. The soldiers followed his commands, focusing first on getting their wounded leader to safety before coming together to reorganize. Ben instructs the group to arrange themselves into a defensive formation. Ben explained that their strategy would only delay things briefly, but assured him that 5 minutes was all he required. Ben nodded with determination, silently promising that they would endure whatever it took to persevere. Ventured further into the dense forest, his mind occupied with thoughts about whether arrows could truly pierce tough armor. The response given is a clear refusal. He retrieves Ding's replicating hammer, a legendary instrument renowned for its power to copy consumable items and speed up the crafting process, and comes to the realization that his strategy could actually work. At the same time, the soldiers struggle fiercely in the forest, doing everything they can to push back the orc invasion. Ben quietly reassured himself, determined to persevere against any challenge. Attempting to endure for the full 5 minutes that had asked for, they pushed themselves to keep going. Ben claimed that their only option was to hang on, even as the orc army pressed forward without pause. Despite the overwhelming threat, Ben remained steadfast, declaring that surrender or retreat was not an option for him. At the very moment when Ben faces imminent death from the orc warrior's attack. Without warning, an unknown object shot through the air in the direction of the orc. The character defeats the orc, ending its life. Ben found himself rescued, his mind swirling with bewilderment as he tried to piece together what had just occurred. Additional arrows soared out from the shadows of the forest, striking the orcs with remarkable accuracy. It becomes clear that is secretly creating and launching them from his concealed location. The orc warrior let out a furious roar, caught off guard by the surprising strategy. The orc warrior let out a furious roar while prepared his weapons for battle. The soldiers gaze at with nervous anticipation, silently relying on him to succeed. Developed a unique kind of arrow known as. These rare projectiles possess remarkable force and velocity, allowing them to break through even solid stone. He fashioned the items with the help of a bamboo tool known as a tonga, and recreated the of the short arrow by utilizing Ding's hammer. When he paired these arrows with his gak bow, a special effect triggered, boosting both the strength of his attacks and how easily they pierced through defenses. The orcs pressed on with their relentless attack. The soldiers battled bravely, striving to give a chance to strike. Took advantage of the moment and let his unique arrow fly, striking the orc warrior's helmet head-on. Is aware that arrows of this kind can pierce targets with force matching that of a rifle bullet. The arrow shot straight through the orc warrior's heavy armor, striking with such force that it ended the creature's life instantly. Its level swiftly increased by 3 all at once. Acquires the legendary title of Orc Slayer, granting him greater strength whenever he battles orcs and causing them to tremble in his presence. Panic quickly overtakes the orcs that are still alive. As the soldiers raised their voices, ordering a chase, the group quickly turned and ran away. Accompanied by the soldiers, rushed to join the pursuit. Leaped onto the back of an orc that attempted to flee. He unleashed a flurry of arrows, each one striking with such accuracy that the target had no chance to flee. A sharp arrow flew from his bow, embedding itself deep into the orc's skull. Before long, the group succeeded in eliminating the last of the orc soldiers. After the fighting ended, the task of stopping the invading orc army had finally been accomplished. Efforts culminated in a remarkable 92% contribution, prompting the system to declare his mission a resounding success with an outstanding achievement. The triumphant soldiers raised their voices in unison, calling out Master's name as they celebrated their victory. Gained the unwavering confidence of his squad, and as a result, he was awarded a secret title, Battlefield Commander, that boosted his charisma by 10 points. Notices that Hans, the group's wounded leader, is being helped by others. Hans, his voice filled with emotion, confided in that their constant focus on defense had made him doubt whether they would ever accomplish their dream of overcoming the orcs. He expresses his heartfelt gratitude. The other soldiers soon followed, each one showing their appreciation as well. Expresses gratitude to them in response. Comes to the realization that his supplementary exam has finally concluded. He considers making his way back to the blacksmith's tower. However, she soon begins to question how she might return to that place. While contemplates a way back, the focus moves to the blacksmith's central tower. Ding stood in place, his expression filled with sorrow as he lamented the blacksmith tower's descent into decay. He points out that the knights have received all the praise and recognition. Only people who are lured by the promise of wealth ever approach their tower. Ding believed that only a person truly deserving could handle the legendary sword destined to fulfill the prophecy, insisting it must be someone who embodied the genuine soul of a blacksmith. Throughout history, numerous hopefuls had fallen short of meeting the expectations set by the ancient prophecy from the god of blacksmiths, a prophecy that predicted a chosen one would one day return their honor and wealth. One of the tower masters suddenly cuts him off with a sarcastic remark, questioning whether the great Ding is truly the sole tower master worthy of taking on the sword's challenge. Regarded the situation with disdain, questioning whether the supposed chosen one might actually be nothing more than a fabrication. Everyone wondered why their hectic routines had been interrupted, also that testing privileges could be given to an unfamiliar young outsider. Ding responded sharply, chastising and questioning whether he had even read the letter Ding had sent, which clarified that deserved this opportunity by successfully completing the challenge they had established. Ding remarked that even though had not switched his class, he had already demonstrated remarkable talent in forging weapons, commanding troops, and defeating groups of orc fighters. The others reacted with disbelief when they heard the mention of annihilation, unable to accept that someone who had not yet a class change was capable of such a feat. Ding went on to explain that the test had been created according to an ancient prophecy, which declared that the chosen heir of the god of blacksmiths needed to surpass all others in strength. Because of this, it would be the sword itself that would ultimately reveal the true answer. Ding confidently promises that the truth will be revealed to everyone soon. Just then, a guard enters the hall to inform the group that Lord has arrived. Ding gave the command for the person to be brought before him. The enormous doors swung wide, allowing to step into the grand, awe-inspiring hall. Ding greeted him warmly, declaring that he had successfully completed the test and now possessed the privilege to step into the revered blacksmith's sanctum. He mentions that he now qualifies to attempt claiming the Sword of Prophecy, a legendary weapon once bestowed by the god of blacksmiths. Ding explained that the outcome would be determined as soon as he picked up the sword, and promised that an appropriate reward would follow. Reflected on the words suitable reward, recalling that he had finished an extra SS rank mission during his class change trial, and began to wonder if his prize might be the acquisition of a legendary class. Then approached, offering congratulations for reaching such an esteemed position and commending remarkable skills and decisive actions during a pivotal instant. However, his tone shifted to one of superiority, as he pointed out that the arrow crafted was merely an imitation of a renowned weapon known as. Believed everything depended on chance. He thought that if he hadn't owned his extraordinary bow, he would never have succeeded in passing the test. With a sly grin, he issued a challenge to, urging him to draw the sword and test whether fortune would favor him once more. Gazes at the group of Blacksmith Tower masters gathered before him. They suddenly understood that these were elite NPCs, each one responsible for shaping the legendary tales of Ares. He notices that, who leads the Bow Blacksmith Tower, possesses an impressive level of 365. Inside the hall, every individual holds titles and ranks that command respect among blacksmiths. While their achievements are remarkable, remains confident, believing his own abilities measure up to theirs. He questioned whether, if only raw talent were measured and titles were set aside, he might come out on top. As drew closer to the legendary sword, the blade began to shine brightly, radiating a powerful energy that surged outward and startled, and everyone nearby. The blade shimmered with extraordinary energy, before erupting in a brilliant burst of light that swallowed the whole hall. Stood frozen, his mind reeling with confusion as radiant energy enveloped him from all sides. As the light fades away, remains in the same place, puzzled by the sudden absence of the sword that has vanished without a trace. At that instant, Ding comes to understand the situation and declares that the prophecy has come to pass in this very way. Ding burst into laughter, suddenly understanding that all along, they had been creating their own traditions and rules, while the rightful heir had never needed to lay a hand on the sword to demonstrate his value. Consumed by frustration, muttered bitter complaints about the predicament he faced, struggling to come to terms with the events that had unfolded. A congratulatory system message appeared before, proclaiming that the world's very first god class had emerged in Ares. Felt a surge of frustration and disbelief, unable to comprehend how someone so inexperienced could be given such a prestigious title. At the same time, a system notification appeared, announcing that had been promoted to the class of god of blacksmithing. And Ding could hardly believe what they had just witnessed, realizing that this was more than an ordinary god class. It was the very first one ever discovered in the game's history. Acquires an extraordinary SSS-ranked title known as the God of Blacksmithing, endowing him with remarkable powers. Now free from any limitations related to material quality while forging, he gains experience automatically, with the amount varying based on the items he creates. The prophecy assures that, as a blacksmith, he is destined to surpass all others in strength. Additionally, a new class quest called the Test of the Sword is revealed, set to unlock when he attains level 100. The other tower masters exchanged hushed words, noting that the sword had selected the outsider, and quietly agreeing that the ancient prophecy about the successor to the god of blacksmiths had finally come to pass. Raises his voice, declaring that he will never be able to accept what has happened. Insisted that, as the ones in charge of the tower, they had been waiting patiently for many years for the true heir who would be granted a message from the god of blacksmiths. He believed that simply being chosen by the sword was not enough proof that the god had made his decision. Ding raised his voice, commanding the other person to halt, firmly declaring that the prophecy could not be changed. Responded by calling the situation a farce and pointed out that, according to the prophecy, the successor needed to gain approval from every tower master. As the head of the Bow Blacksmithing Tower, formally issued a challenge to, inviting him to a blacksmith's duel. Made his terms unmistakable, declaring that should manage to overcome him in the upcoming duel, he would acknowledge as his rightful successor. However, if emerged victorious, would be forced to give up the role that the Sword of Prophecy had selected for him. Ding's frustration grew as he watched lose control, prompting him to command the rest of the group to hold back without delay. Shot a look of contempt at his coworkers before turning to, his words dripping with sarcasm as he suggested that was free to escape if that was what he wanted. In that situation, he would offer him the role of Deputy Tower Master, provided that he obediently accepted the training he was given. Let out a defiant, mocking laugh. Remained composed and assured as he let his challenger know that he was ready to take on the competition. At that instant, the hidden talent unique to blacksmiths revealed itself. They communicated their thoughts and feelings through the work of their hands. Discovers he now possesses the power to create divine objects tailored to his own design. A fresh S-rank quest called Duel of the Blacksmiths emerged, tasking the participant with defeating in a head-to-head challenge. Clarifies that their style of dueling does not follow the traditions of knights. Instead, it is a contest where two creations, each shaped by the spirit of their maker in the forge, face off against each other. The rule is straightforward. Both swords are tested in a head-to-head clash, and the blade that shatters first determines its creator's defeat. Informed that the finest blacksmith workshop had already been established within the hall. Now that, possessed blacksmithing abilities, believed he would only need a single day to forge his own weapon. With a hint of sarcasm, remarked that if really was the god of blacksmithing, then their paths would cross again the following day. Once departed, Ding cautioned, pointing out that he had agreed to the duel without enough thought. Ding went on to explain that ranked among the tower's most talented masters. Nodded in agreement, confessing that remaining in his former line of work would have meant certain defeat in this situation. Within the realm of the game Ares, characters received extraordinary abilities and upgrades according to their rank and earned titles. Additionally, every tower master is gifted with their own distinct special powers. Soon noticed that once his class shifted to the god class, the old distinctions faded away. With his newly gained ability, it was now personal talent that truly set people apart. Possessed an extraordinary ability known as custom god crafting, a powerful skill of divine rank. This skill enabled him to forge unique artifacts tailored to his wishes, letting him bestow any effect he imagined upon them. However, the more impressive the effect he wanted, the more challenging the crafting process became. At the same time, inside his workshop, reflects on memories from earlier in his life. He recalled his days as a blacksmith, forging swords with skilled hands. He had always been told that the craft of forging swords belonged to him by birthright, a legacy carefully handed down through many generations of his family. However, when a person with far greater talent arrived, his path changed, and rather than pursuing a future he found himself appointed as the leader of the Bow Tower. He found the taste unpleasant, yet he decided to endure it for the sake of honoring the great Ding. However, he could never accept Ding suddenly introducing an outsider, and treating that person as more important than himself. Channels every ounce of his frustration and bitterness into his hammering, letting his emotions drive each powerful strike. A tremendous burst of flames erupted throughout the foundry. Inside's workshop, Ding observed as carefully crafted his sword. Ding believes that bestowing powers and properties upon artifacts abides by a fundamental rule of gains and losses. In order to secure an upper hand in this confrontation, he decides to focus on strengthening durability and enhancing the weapon breaker trait as much as possible. To gain the power he desires, he realizes he needs to forge a sword of the best quality. However, he is puzzled because sword appears to only possess the durability and features of a rare-grade weapon. Completes crafting his sword, and it begins to shine with a radiant glow. Ding found himself filled with curiosity and awe as he pondered the real intentions and remarkable skills possessed by the god of blacksmithing. The following day, a crowd assembled to witness the duel unfold. Gave a sarcastic smile, believing that must have succeeded at creating something since he hadn't chosen to flee. He challenges him to prove whether he is truly worthy of the title, successor of the gods. Was the first to reveal his sword. Unveiled his Dark Knight sword, an extraordinary weapon boasting a durability rating of 12,000 and an attack strength of 664. Beyond its impressive stats, the blade possessed rare features that boosted its durability by 35% and secretly endowed it with the powerful weapon breaker ability. Ding, along with the other attendees, watched in awe as displayed his remarkable talent, having crafted an extraordinary and flawless sword in just a single night. Proudly claims that his sword stands as a remarkable work of art. Carrying the weight of his family's customs and hidden skills, he insists that reveal his sword to him. Drew his sword, leaving both and Ding visibly stunned by the unexpected action. Held his very first custom sword, crafted to a rare grade, boasting an attack power of 177 but limited to just 1,000 durability. A tower master watched with disdain, finding sword laughable and beginning to believe that judgment could have been correct. His face lit up with a victorious grin, certain that Ding had finally slipped and committed a serious error. He was told that he was squandering his time on a rogue and his trivial pursuits. Declared that everything would finish at this moment and charged straight at, their swords meeting in a powerful collision. Despite the relentless assault, held his ground, refusing to back down. The hallway filled with the reverberating noise of metal striking against metal. Without warning, a sharp crashing noise echoed through the air, followed by a clear ringing sound, leaving everyone nearby frozen in stunned silence. Its one-of-a-kind blade, the Dark Knight, lay broken and scattered in fragments across the ground. Remained silent, struggling to grasp what has just occurred. Explained in a composed manner that the worth of a sword goes beyond simply its grade. The intricate design of sword became visible once more, showcasing its rare active power, a blade capable of slicing through other weapons, with a 65% probability of breaking the enemy's armament. This one-of-a-kind sword could not be repaired and was meant to be discarded once it wore out completely. In that instant, Ding recalls his father's advice, who once assured him that the god of blacksmithing would eventually arrive in this place. A person destined to break apart old beliefs and offer fresh lessons was someone everyone would eventually encounter. Ding recalled the moment when a youthful, full of hope, had approached his father with a question. Had wondered aloud if he might earn his father's guidance, dreaming that becoming a skilled blacksmith would make him worthy of such instruction. The story shifts back to the workshop not long ago, where told Ding that simply destroying swords wouldn't be enough to persuade the tower masters. Because of this, chose to create a sword strong enough to slice through other swords. At that moment, Ding questioned whether such a thing could truly happen, silently acknowledging the difficulty it always presented. Had explained that crafting an artifact with specific qualities ultimately depended on the blacksmith's dedication and expertise. At that moment, Ding understood what was really happening. The decision, daring and unconventional, was made possible by the confidence and skill needed to bring such an ambitious idea to life. He comes to the realization that embodies every one of these traits. Stared in disbelief at the broken remains of his sword, quietly uttering the title of the god of blacksmithing. He pondered whether he might one day be able to craft a sword like that himself. Gazes at him, a peaceful smile resting on his lips. He explains to him that, in his view, nothing is ever truly impossible. Sank to his knees, acknowledging that he had lost. Announced to that he was now in the presence of the god of blacksmithing. At that moment, a message window appeared, revealing that the blacksmith's quest duel had reached a successful conclusion. The towering structure loomed in the distance, its height dominating the scene behind everything else. The tower masters walked up to and requested that he receive his reward. They offer him a box filled with 500 gold coins. Alongside these items was a scroll that detailed the instructions for making a legendary bow. Acknowledged that, among the 10 greatest treasures of the blacksmith's tower, this bow recipe was one he had never managed to finish. He believed that passing it on to someone destined for greatness was the best way for it to be used. Ding informed that with the arrival of the god of blacksmithing, they would begin their efforts again with fresh determination. She encourages him to strive for the highest level of authority. He urged the other to venture beyond his current boundaries, proclaiming that this moment marked the beginning of the god's development. The perspective moves to reality, showing happily enjoying a celebration with his friend. Hoon could hardly contain his excitement and disbelief as he realized he was enjoying beer paid for by. With genuine enthusiasm, he offered heartfelt congratulations for acquiring a god-ranked class, remarking on how unbelievable it was. Explained that he had suggested the game, believing it would be unfortunate for such skill to go unused. He had never expected to possess such remarkable skill in playing. After enduring so much hardship in the blacksmith's workshop, was at last beginning to experience hope. Wondered aloud about the significance of the god class, while responded with his belief that, for now, nothing seemed particularly changed. Explained that his top priority was settling his father's hospital bill the next day. In addition, he noted with concern that the treatment expenses had increased by another 10 million won in the meantime. Hoon informed him that he had looked into the new medication for his father, but explained that, because insurance would not pay for it, the price was no less than $2 million. Hoon also brings up the expenses that needs to cover for his burn treatments. Realized that simply possessing the class would not guarantee profit. He understood that he could only create and sell a limited number of artifacts due to physical constraints. He clarifies that his journey to gain strength and recognition must start immediately, marking the beginning of the god's ascent. He suggests that forming a connection with the most renowned individual in Ares would allow him to earn far greater rewards and obtain rare items, even from quests of equal difficulty. With these resources, he could once again create exceptional artifacts. Considered what it would mean to connect with the game's most popular figure, while Hoon, full of excitement, announced that he had come up with a plan and urged to hold on for a moment. Filled with excitement, expresses his confidence that his older brother will reach great heights and support him in moving forward. Let out a dismissive laugh and reminded him to focus on keeping his job. Excitedly shared with his friend the latest updates from the Ares user community, highlighting the widespread buzz about the player known as Lord, who, after consistently holding the 21st rank, had at last ascended to the legendary class. However, points out that what they've seen so far isn't even the most impressive aspect. It was truly remarkable that Lord had succeeded in overcoming Sword King. No one had ever achieved such a feat, since nobody had ever succeeded in landing a single blow on him. Many players found themselves curious about the methods Lord used to accomplish such a feat. At the same time, Smind lingered on the burden of paying 30 million won each month for hospital expenses. He remembered that the overdue bills needed to be paid before the day ended. He comes to understand that, despite pooling both his quest rewards and the money from the auction, the total still falls short. Knew he couldn't allow his father's care to be interrupted. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message saying that a sword he crafted had sold for 53,310 gold coins, purchased by someone named Lord. Hurried toward the hospital reception desk without hesitation. He approached the receptionist and explained his intention to settle all the remaining medical expenses without delay. Resolved that quitting Ares was no longer an option for him. While playing, he noticed a heartfelt message from Lord expressing gratitude for his help. The Lord expressed his gratitude, sharing that sword allowed him to achieve his goal of succeeding in his test. He went on to say that anyone who truly recognized the worth of the sword he crafted would see that the 50 million won price was, in reality, quite reasonable. The Lord's message revealed that its blade had sliced through the Sword King's weapon, leaving a gap that caught the king off guard. Lord went on with his message, informing Master that the renowned Sword King and ruler of the kingdom awaited his arrival. Stared at the message, puzzled by the king's request for him to forge a sword, while the Lord insisted that should go see the king in person. Understands that this chance might be the answer to everything troubling him, from covering his father's medical expenses to affording the latest medication. He makes up his mind to seek out, and is determined to recover his missing workshop along the journey. In another location, a well-dressed man makes his entrance. He steps into an ancient blacksmith's workshop, a curious sight in the present day, and reminds them that just 1 month is left before their agreement expires. Was on the phone with his friend, who sounded stunned as he explained that meeting was not possible. Dismissed the notion that simply obtaining a god-ranked class was the key to everything, his mind filled with doubt about how someone who was only a level 10 novice could possibly encounter a king. He states that encountering a high-ranking NPC requires both the player's level and their fame to be impressive, and specifically, meeting demands reaching at least level 200. Offers comfort, insisting that the challenge can be overcome, and shares information about the upcoming martial arts tournament. He went on to describe how this was an annual event in the kingdom, only open to participants whose levels fell between 50 and 60. He explains that King continually seeks out skilled people who show promise, which is the reason he organizes an annual tournament open to newcomers. He verifies that the tournament will take place in the near future, and explains that personally awards the prize money to the champion. Explained that meeting right away would only be possible by following this method. Soon after, set off in a carriage, heading toward his next destination. Following Ding's suggestion, he makes his way toward the castle area. Ding had explained to him that this area lay right at the edge of the Prime and Kingdoms, a battlefield where relentless clashes with the undead occurred every day, and that his unique skills would be more valuable here than anywhere else. The area surrounding the castle served as where defenders struggled to repel waves of invading undead creatures. Ding believed that this spot offered the quickest way to gain experience and increase one's level. Felt unwavering resolve to see the next mission through, regardless of any obstacles that might arise. When they reached the area surrounding the castle, Centurion Render welcomes him upon his arrival. A soldier approached, wondering aloud whether the newcomer belonged to the group of reinforcements sent from the capital. The commander, noticing the arrival, remarked that his presence could not have come at a better moment, explaining that they desperately required as many helping hands as possible at that time. The commander informed everyone that the population of undead attackers was steadily growing. Wondered aloud if the commander understood the reason, and the commander confirmed that he did. He recounts how, in earlier times, the sound of the holy bell would echo throughout the castle's lands. The strength of the invading undead would diminish, allowing them to be eliminated with less difficulty. Up to this point, the ringing bell had kept faraway undead from drawing near. Not long before, the bell had been broken into fragments. The commander explained that their forces had been taken off guard. As they hurried to strengthen their defenses, the enemy seemed to notice their actions and started to advance cautiously. Inquired of Commander Render whether there was any possibility of fixing the bell. Render's eyes widened as the truth about its identity dawned on him. Excitement sparked in Render's voice as he inquired whether had arrived representing Master Ding. In response, affirmed that he was sent by Ding, who led the Tower of. Render chastised for keeping the news to himself for so long, explaining that everyone had been waiting on him, and then hurriedly led him to meet the captain. Encountered Carl, the leader of the castle knights, who questioned whether the great Ding had personally dispatched him. Render replied affirmatively and clarified that wanted to view the Rama's bell with his own eyes. Captain Carl explains to the group that Ding has already determined the bell cannot be fixed. He reveals that the Lord had made multiple hidden efforts to have it fixed, yet all the specialists delivered the same verdict. The broken Rama spell remains labeled as an artifact beyond repair. He mentions that someone is still inside the castle, desperately searching for a solution, but all their efforts are hopeless. Render remembered that the individual had reached level 290, but accomplishing the task had still been out of reach. Captain Carl inquired about his abilities, wanting to know his current level. Revealed that he was at level 13, a response that left Render visibly stunned. The captain explained, too, that he had no intention of blaming someone who had come to offer assistance, but suggested that, given his current abilities, it might be better for him to seek out a role where he could make a real difference. The captain informs everyone that the castle's territory faces total destruction, warning that the moment the undead's primary forces march forward, their end will arrive. The captain declared his unwavering responsibility to safeguard both the Lord and the people until the very end, feeling compelled to fulfill his duty no matter the circumstances. Just then, a soldier rushed into the room, urgently announcing that the undead had begun their assault on the eastern wall. A horde of ghouls surged forward, closing in on the group with terrifying speed. The ghoul was revealed to be at level 41. Recognizing the danger, the captain urgently instructed his soldiers to defend the gates no matter what happened, stressing how dire the situation had become. He instructs Render to come along with him. She reminds that all the topics they talked about need to stay confidential. Believes that, much like the orc war he once faced, he is capable of managing the new threat. As a fresh regional war quest starts, he prepares himself to fight off the advancing ghouls and protect the gates from their attack. A massive swarm of ghouls charged relentlessly at the fortress walls. The soldiers battled with intense determination, showing no signs of backing down. Render shared his knowledge, telling the group that defeating undead creatures was difficult without holy weapons, so they would need to attack the same area again and again to have any chance of victory. Render stared in awe as brought down a ghoul with just one well-aimed arrow to its head. Although they lacked any sacred abilities, activated his flying arrow skill. A single, forceful blow slices straight through several ghouls lined up in its path. The arrow flew powerfully, tearing through several ghouls in succession as it passed. The soldiers erupted in joyful celebration, their voices rising in a chorus of excitement. Render boldly announces his determination to defeat every opponent, regardless of their numbers. Quietly reassures himself, realizing the situation is more manageable than he expected, and he grows hopeful that if everything stays on track, they will be able to finish the mission successfully. A notification from the system signals the beginning of a brand new tale. Without warning, a formidable danger emerged, presenting a mission that demanded the defeat of an enormous siege ghoul. Terror the soldiers as the enormous ghoul appeared before them, making them understand the urgent need to summon their captain without delay. However, one of the soldiers informs them that Captain Carl is occupied with protecting the gate and cannot spare any additional troops. With the threat drawing nearer, anxieties grew that the wall might soon collapse. Declared his intention to distract the monster, and then leaped from the wall to carry out his plan. The soldiers shout out anxiously, trying to alert him that facing the danger alone is far too risky. Face the towering ghoul in the area beneath. With practiced agility, the character avoided each strike from the opponent and responded with well-timed counterattacks. Managed to capture the attention of the enormous creature. Believes that after he removes it, everything will start to go well. He skillfully evaded each of the ghoul's vicious strikes. He concludes that the best first step is to move it as far from the wall as he can. He questions in his mind whether he now has its complete focus. The ghoul lunged at him without warning, unleashing a surge of power that left him defenseless. Could hardly believe how quickly the beast moved. In order to put some space between himself and his opponent, he opts to use his bow instead of his previous weapon. Sliding swiftly across the ground, they launched an arrow through the air. The arrow struck the ghoul squarely in the head. The arrow struck its target, only to deflect harmlessly away. No harm was done in the process. Feels a surge of surprise. The ghoul launched a powerful counterattack, leaving his health dangerously low, falling beneath 10%. A system notification alerted him that if his health dropped to 0%, he would be automatically logged out of the game. Let out a desperate scream, unwilling to accept defeat, yet his strength gave out and he collapsed onto the ground, overcome by exhaustion. Drops to his knees, his mind swirling with disbelief at how ridiculous the idea of a forced logout seems. He comes to the understanding that failing to finish this event will cost him the chance to enter the martial arts tournament. If that were to occur, his father's medical expenses would become an issue. Continuing his recovery and returning to work as a blacksmith would no longer be possible for him. He is determined not to return to his former, despairing self, understanding that this game is his sole opportunity to transform his life. Filled with resolve, insists to himself that surrender is not an option, regardless of the circumstances. He released another arrow, which struck the enormous ghoul directly. The creature howled in agony, yet the monster quickly struck back, unleashing a powerful blast of sound. His health bar dwindled until it showed less than 3% remaining. Although was gravely wounded, he shouted with determination that surrender was not an option for him. She another arrow, making it clear through her actions that the fight was far from finished. He recoils in shock when he realizes that the string on his bow has broken. The ghoul spots a chance and strikes with overwhelming force. His health bar dropped until only a single point remained. On the brink of losing, clings fiercely to his determination, unwilling to surrender. Because of his unwavering determination, a system notification suddenly appeared, declaring that he had fulfilled a unique requirement. The message went on to clarify that since his health had dropped under 5%, his intense determination and resolve now matched the standards set by the god of blacksmithing, granting him access to a brand new skill. Unlocked a special skill known as emergency god crafting, which required him to create a weapon in just 20 seconds. The weapon's power would last just 30 seconds, and understood that this brief window was his opportunity. The process to create an emergency god starts with a countdown lasting 19 seconds. Realizes that this mission is his final opportunity to succeed. He carefully chooses the supplies he needs. With astonishing quickness, they set to work forging the weapon. The countdown kept ticking down. The moment the countdown reaches its end. After crafting a fresh sword, sprang forward to confront the monster once more. A fierce shout bursts from him, echoing like a warrior's call across the battlefield. The character rushed at the enormous ghoul, unleashing the scythe of skill. For a brief instant, it seemed as though time itself had halted, leaving the towering ghoul motionless and suspended in place. With a swift motion, he drives his newly acquired sword through the target, ending the fight with one decisive strike. The enormous ghoul collapsed in defeat while, drained of energy, surveyed the aftermath. A triumphant grin spreads across his face as the realization of his success washes over him. A notification appeared, declaring that he had defeated the massive ghoul and earned a huge amount of experience, which boosted his level up to 38. Felt a wave of relief certain that his current abilities would be enough for him to join the tournament. Overwhelmed by fatigue, he sank to the ground just as Render and the soldiers hurried over, urgently shouting his name. Eventually regained consciousness, discovering he was lying in a bed, his body wrapped in fresh bandages. As he pushed himself upright, confusion filled his mind about how long he had been out, and he immediately began to question what had become of the ghoul. As regained consciousness, he discovered that a group of soldiers had gathered around him, their voices raised in unison as they celebrated him as a genuine hero. A soldier stepped forward to express his gratitude, telling him that their survival that day was only possible because of his actions. Captain Carl approached as well, expressing his gratitude and curiosity about the method behind the achievement. Admits that he finds it difficult to put his thoughts into words. He realizes that no matter what he says, it will sound far-fetched. The captain, however, refuses to let him downplay his actions, pointing out that he was the true leader in the fight today. Pondered his next move, recalling that creatures such as ghouls, much like ghosts, possessed a vulnerability to sacred energy. The sight brought to his mind the legendary sword of the four symbols, famous for driving away evil spirits and protecting people from calamities. Remembering the restoration skills his father had shown him, he managed to revive the sword. Experiences a surge of gratitude as everything unfolds just as he had hoped. Captain Carl was determined to show his gratitude, so he handed a bag filled with 2,000 gold coins. The generous reward delighted, especially since the amount equaled 2,001,000. Captain Carl confessed to himself that he had been wrong about, having assumed the boy was no different from the other outsiders. The captain lowered his head in a respectful gesture, silently expressing his regret and hoping for forgiveness. Offered comfort, expressing gratitude for being recognized, and in that instant the bond between them grew as strong as it could be. Captain Carl formally asked to fix the bell on the Rama. The captain shared his belief that he sensed a sacred energy in the sword wielded before, and because of that remarkable power, he was confident that could succeed. Expressed his gratitude for the kind words, but explained that he needed to leave immediately for the kingdom of. Captain Carl grinned as he confessed that he had overlooked something crucial, occupation as a blacksmith. He explains that the Lord owns a famous metal, and suggests that if the bell is fixed, the Lord might offer it as a reward. His eyes widened with astonishment at the mention of a legendary metal, and his curiosity was instantly piqued. Captain Carl leads him over to where the bell is displayed. He uncovers a heap of shimmering golden shards, and clarifies that these pieces make up the Rama spell. Stares in disbelief, taking in the sight of the bell, which lies in pieces rather than simply being damaged. The captain turns to him, expressing doubt about whether has the ability to restore it, and questioning if such a thing is even possible. Realized the situation was even more troubling than he had anticipated, yet he remained convinced that a solution was still possible. Just then, a woman walks over to join them. She announces in a detached manner that fixing the bell is impossible. She mentions that, despite reaching level 290 herself, she still finds it impossible, leaving her puzzled about how he could assert that he is capable. She claimed he was pretending to be someone he was. Before that, Bell, also known as team leader, informed everyone of her decision to leave the guild. Who leads the Golden Shield Guild, is taken aback when he learns of her sudden resignation and questions whether she feels no attachment to the achievements she has worked so hard to attain. In response, she simply explains that exhaustion has overtaken her. Crone attempts to convince her not to leave, insisting that if she manages to recruit the blacksmith now, their situation will improve. However, she responds with frustration, arguing that this is exactly the issue and questioning how they could justify paying such an enormous sum 500 million annually to someone chosen at random. Crone claims that the blacksmith managed to sell his very first sword for 50 million won. Crone believes that if they succeed in bringing into the guild, their group will quickly gain power and prestige. Bell pointed out to Crown that their previous blacksmith had only been hired from outside, and reminded him that the next one had disappeared with the advance payment. She mentioned that a different blacksmith had once struck it rich in the lottery before vanishing without a trace, then proceeded to recount a series of other disappointments. Bell pleaded with him to halt his actions, detailing the challenges she faced in tidying up the chaos, and firmly stressed that he should not interfere with her efforts. Crone, though hesitant, ultimately accepts the choice she has made. He promises that there will always be a spot waiting for her should she ever choose to come back. The story transitions to the grand halls of Castle. Belle approached the remains of the village, stunned by the devastation and struggling to comprehend how such a place could have vanished so completely. She realizes that this is the place where she first understood the people around her aren't just background characters, but individuals as real as herself. Belle is convinced that repairing the Rama's bell might be the key to ending the chaos and devastation surrounding them. She realizes it's necessary to return and inspect the bell once more. Upon arriving at the bell room, she is taken aback to discover already present. Suspicion fills her as she confronts him, questioning his authenticity. Clearly puzzled, questions her authority to make such a statement. She confidently explains that she holds the position of a blacksmith far superior to his own. Captain Carl steps between the group, urging everyone to remain calm and avoid any confrontation. He then presents Belle, explaining that she is the skilled blacksmith he had spoken of before. Turning to, Carl explains that this is the individual who played a key role in defeating the ghouls. The captain, with a smile, mentions that has now volunteered to repair the bell as well. Belle, thinking to herself with a hint of sarcasm, questions how someone at level 38 could hope to drive away ghouls and now also promises to fix the bell. Belle confronted, alleging that he was attempting to exploit the worsening conditions within the castle's territory. In response, remained calm and questioned Belle about the topics she had been discussing since coming there. Pays no attention to her, choosing instead to study the broken pieces of the bell with curiosity, questioning internally whether they might have altered somehow. A notification popped up, stating that Rama's bell now radiated holy energy, had been utterly shattered and could not be fixed. Realizing this, understood that conventional ways of repairing it were hopeless. He picks up a hammer and brings it down hard on one of the broken pieces. Belle let out a terrified scream, desperately pleading for him to stop. Responded in a steady voice, assuring her that achieving it was within reach. He assures them that bringing things back to their original state can be achieved. Belle, her voice edged with frustration, demanded to know if he truly understood what it meant for an artifact to be beyond repair. Just then, a soldier burst into the room, urgently calling out for the captain. She informs the group that an overwhelming horde of undead is flooding into the area. Shock sweeps through the crowd. Suddenly, a system window pops up before. At first, he assumes it signals a new quest, but as he reads further, he understands it is actually an update notification. A notification appeared, informing everyone that the castle region update was, and once the process finished, the newly updated area would be established. They come to understand that the area is transforming into a domain overrun by the undead. Belle thinks everything is over, but disagrees and explains that forging the bell will allow them to put an end to it. Belle believed that what he was saying could never happen, yet remained firm in his belief that it could. Shifted his attention to Belle, wanting to know her thoughts about the castle region. He remembered that she had been the one most eager to defend it. Belle acknowledged to herself that this point made sense, yet she felt uncertain about how to proceed. As moved ahead, he gestured for Belle to come with him and quietly stored the pieces of the Rama spell in his inventory. Expressed with excitement, a firm determination that they would work together to defend this place. Captain Carl expressed his trust in his ability to fix the bell, assuring him that he would do everything he could to keep the enemies at bay. In response, confidently accepted the responsibility, urging Captain Carl to leave the task in his hands. The captain lifted his sword high, urging his soldiers to remain hopeful and promising that they would continue battling until the very last moment. He encourages the group to remain steadfast, emphasizing the importance of keeping safe. Inside the workshop where the blacksmith worked, Belle wondered aloud about his next move, seeking to understand his intentions. In response, revealed that after breaking the shard earlier, he noticed the holy power remained present, suggesting that the material itself contained the power. He intends to melt the metal and craft a new bell, convinced that a fully restored bell will possess even greater holy power. Belle remarked to herself that this was the first time she had witnessed such an ability, while explained that sometimes things could be repaired without relying on a special skill. The process of melting down the materials was set into motion. Belle stared in disbelief, marveling at the thought that he might actually attempt such a task manually despite the modern era. Wondered aloud why she remained idle, pointing out that he couldn't manage the task by himself. At the same time, inside the offices where the game developers worked. A developer anxiously monitored the dwindling countdown for the region update, realizing there was less than an hour left. Overcome with frustration, he admitted to himself that they were facing serious problems and feared the entire update effort would be wasted. On update day, while was grumbling, a coworker questioned the reason for his complaints. In response, directed the coworker's attention to the screen. The colleague suspects that the topic might involve the Blacksmith player. He insisted that a player would be unable to resolve the issue, yet their female coworker explained that Bell was not just any regular player. On the long-awaited day when the region update was released, the conflict grew fiercer than ever. Carl raised his voice, commanding everyone to block the undead and keep them from getting inside. The two opponents battled fiercely, their breaths coming in heavy gasps as fatigue weighed them down. The soldiers endure savage assaults. One of them was nearly taken down by a massive monster, but Carl stepped in just in time and defeated the creature. Captain Carl hurried over to assess the situation, then urgently called out to his crew, urging them to persevere a bit more. He encouraged everyone to defend the town that had always been their home. As the battle raged on, Captain Carl noticed his sword starting to fracture. A wave of hopelessness washed over him as he questioned why such misfortune would strike at this crucial moment. Just as his sword neared the point of breaking, a monstrous creature sprang toward him, and the captain responded with a defiant yell. He mutters bitterly to himself, convinced that this is how everything will come to an end. A loud, piercing ring swept over the battlefield without warning. The undead grasped their skulls, howling in agony. One after another, they were engulfed in fire and collapsed, while the strange ringing of the bell echoed farther and farther. The sound of the bell reverberated across the land, prompting the defenders to turn with hopeful smiles toward where the ringing had begun. Captain Carl expressed his joy as he announced that the bell on the Rama had finally been fixed. Inside the developer's workspace, a startled developer suddenly sprayed his drink in astonishment, completely overwhelmed by the unbelievable sight before him. Inside the blacksmith's workshop, carefully completed the last details on the bell. The developers began to question whether their efforts had truly paid off. The developer, unable to believe what he was hearing, turned to his team and questioned whether he might be losing his sanity. Inside the workshop, and Bell examined the hammer that had been used for the task. Bell wonders aloud about the method they used to accomplish their goal. Inside the office, a developer raised their voice in alarm, demanding to know what was going on and questioning whether the update had indeed failed. Reveals that has remained awake without rest ever since the update countdown started 7 days earlier. 5 days earlier, had immediately made his way to the blacksmith's workshop located in the region. He assembled the workers from across the city and set them to work on fixing the Rama's bell. As he addressed them, he clarified that their task involved melting down every component to its core materials, in essence, drawing out the sacred energy contained within. As focused on sketching the blueprints, he entrusted Bell with overseeing the workers and ensuring the battlefield was well supplied. Following that moment, initiated the process of crafting a unique god to order. He intended to enhance the bell's strength to better combat undead and malevolent beings, while also seeking to develop an ability capable of causing direct harm. He ordered the workers to turn up the heat in the furnace, raising his voice to make sure they heard him. Driven by a unified determination to safeguard the region, all participants focused their efforts on achieving one common objective. Shouted instructions, urging everyone to concentrate and ensure no impurities remained. Meanwhile, the workers steeled themselves with resolve, fully committed to defending their homeland by any means necessary. They thought that by doing this, the bell would gain even more sacred strength. The panels depict the days gradually slipping away, beginning from 4 days before everything concludes. He moved into the third and then the second. At last the final day arrived, and Bell, weary from it all, kept observing. Bell jolted awake, confused about when she had drifted off to sleep. She gazed at the finished bell, astonished and unable to believe that had spent several days working on it without resting. A glowing notification materialized in front of her, signaling that her status as an apprentice had been activated. She observed a master blacksmith skillfully at work, and as a result, her ability to learn advanced blacksmithing techniques became 22% more efficient. Astonished, she questioned in her mind whether this young man could really be a master craftsman. Remarked that the noise must have been extremely loud, yet Belle had managed to sleep through it without waking. Belle quickly objected, insisting that she hadn't been unconscious for that much time. Offered her comfort, explaining that they were nearly finished and encouraging her to be patient a little longer. Belle suddenly inquires whether the person before her is the blacksmith. After verifying who he was, rested his hand on the freshly finished bell. The bell began to shine with powerful energy, displaying the unique symbol that marked it as his own. Belle gazed at the finished version of herself, her eyes filled with admiration. She felt that describing it as beautiful was not enough, for it stood before her as a truly magnificent work of art. A system notification popped up, informing that was working on his second personalized creation, an item unlike any other, designed to last forever. The message clarified that it was a restored artifact that previously couldn't be fixed. Belle questioned whether this might be the source of its strength, reflecting on how she had never witnessed anyone accomplish such a feat before. Without warning, Belle seizes hands in a firm grip. She excitedly expresses her desire for him to stay by her side from that moment forward. Puzzled by her words, tries to understand her intentions, briefly considering whether she is confessing her feelings, but Belle quickly, and with visible embarrassment, assures him that is not the case. The story shifts back to the fateful day of the battle, when brings down his hand to ring the freshly finished bell. Holy energy surged outward from the bell in powerful waves, obliterating the masses of undead. As the radiant force consumed them, their anguished screams echoed, their forms burning away into nothingness. The soldiers stared in shock, unable to look away from the terrifying events unfolding before them. At that moment, a system notification appeared, announcing that had forged a brand new bell and wiped out the undead. The message also revealed that he now possessed the power to stop the update and begin a new story. Raised his voice in victory, feeling immense relief as he realized he'd made it in time, and silently offered thanks that he hadn't arrived too late. He suddenly crumples to the ground, utterly drained and left in a daze by an overwhelming fatigue. Belle hurried over to check on him, her face filled with worry, just as a system notification appeared, declaring that the quest to fix Rama's bell had been successfully completed. A new notification appeared, informing the reader that the rewards had been updated. At the same time, word rapidly circulates among the Ares players. A user wonders aloud if anyone else is familiar with the blacksmith named, starting a discussion thread called The Reason the Region Update Failed, which features images of the tower both prior to and following Belle's restoration work. Many players remembered because of his reputation for crafting his first custom sword, and they were amazed when he managed to fix the powerful Rama spell. This impressive feat led to a surge of players flocking to his workshop, eager to see more of his skills. Was startled awake in his bed by a never-ending stream of notifications, puzzled by the source of the commotion. He noticed that the number of followers for his workshop had soared to 101,655, leaving him stunned and questioning how such a thing could happen. A smile appeared on his face as he thought about how smart it was to carve his name onto the bell. Now, anyone traveling through the region would notice it. A person approached the door, rapping gently and requesting to come inside. Captain Carl strode in with excitement, declaring that the hero of their land had finally arisen. He informed the young man that he was sent with the Lord's blessing to present a reward for crafting the bell. The amount totaled 330,000 gold pieces. Could hardly believe his eyes when he saw the amount, realizing it matched an astonishing 330 million won. The captain remarked that someone like the Savior had truly earned a reward of such high value. He handed over a box, explaining that it was a present sent directly from the Lord. Lifts the lid and discovers the mythical metal known as orichalcum inside. Expressed gratitude to the captain. Captain Carl asserted that gratitude should be directed toward him, pointing out that, in contrast to other strangers, remained in their area and defended them instead of leaving. The captain shows heartfelt appreciation, sensed the captain's genuine concern, and reflected that his own actions were simply necessary choices. As he thought about the people in Ares, he understood that their hopelessness mirrored the struggles faced in the real world. Informed the captain that he needed to go back to his former home for some time, and the captain quickly gave his approval before departed. Realized the moment had come to take back control of his workshop, so he exited the game. The captain and his fellow crew member stared at the place where it had vanished, remarking to each other about how unusual outsiders seemed to them. The following day had a meeting with a real estate investor. As they sat together, glanced at his phone and noticed a notification confirming that had transferred 330 million won. Informed that he was truly responsible for the action. He showed signs of surprise mixed with genuine respect. 1 year earlier, the story shifts back in time. Took a seat beside, who was carefully looking through the property documents. As examined the papers, he informed that the total cost added up to 330 million won. Brought up the recent news of the massive fire, assuring that the sum he provided would easily cover the hospital expenses. He encouraged to stay positive despite the circumstances. As got ready to depart, his voice filled with uncertainty, requested the chance to repurchase the workshop. Looked at with a puzzled expression, seeking to understand the meaning behind his previous statement. Asked again, clarifying that if he managed to gather enough money, he wanted to know whether would consider selling the workshop back to him. Pointed out that purchasing a workshop that had already burned down would only lead to unnecessary expenses, and suggested that if a workshop was truly needed, it would make more sense to invest in a brand new one. Firmly believes the workshop belongs to them, since it holds so many memories of his father. Pauses to consider the situation. After some thought, he chooses to give a full year as a grace period. Still, he cautions that once the year ends, he will sell the property to whoever offers to buy it first. Expressed his gratitude with genuine warmth, and replied that he would await his call. In the present moment, the character looked over the deposit message once more. Once again expressed his profound respect for. He acknowledges that, despite being the one to propose the idea, deep down he understood he was seeking something unattainable. Clarified that the 1 year was only an approximation, emphasizing that the chance to sell a property like this might have disappeared at any moment. However, had already fulfilled his commitment. Wondered aloud about the reason behind his kindness toward him. Explained that he was the only one who had ever requested to repurchase a property after already having sold it. He explained that his intention was simply to inspire someone who shared his experiences. Expressed gratitude to once more. He realized that, because of the other person's help, he was able to keep his workshop, and he began to consider what he could offer in gratitude. Wanted to know whether he had ever heard of a game named Ares. Let out a laugh, confidently acknowledging his familiarity with the subject. In his mind, it seemed impossible for anyone not to have heard about it nowadays. Admitted to being a blacksmith in Ares, surprising those around him. Observed that this profession seemed to suit perfectly. Wanting to show his appreciation, decided to craft a special artifact as a present for. His enthusiasm showed as he wondered aloud whether he could create a unique item for him, not caring about what kind of effect, category, or strength it might have. Smiled warmly and assured him that he could have anything he desired, vowing to make it for him. Stepped into the bustling tavern. Belle gestures for him to join her, inviting him to take a seat by her side. They had not laid eyes on one another since the events of the undead crisis. Belle expressed her frustration over how difficult it had been to locate. In response, offered an apology, but Belle quickly revealed that she had only been joking. Belle formally introduced herself to the group, sharing that she had once served as the chief strategist for the Golden Shield Guild and was responsible for transforming the guild into its current form. On that particular day, she felt absolutely sure about one thing, was destined to rise and become one of the highest-ranking players. Belle wasted no time and immediately expressed her intentions. She made it clear that, once he decided to form a guild, her desire was to be the very first person to join. Teased her about how she had accused him of being a scammer not long ago, prompting Belle to quickly offer an apology. She defended her perspective, explaining that anyone else would have made the same mistake in that circumstance. In response, assured her that he had only been joking. Expressed his anticipation for collaborating with her, and they exchanged a handshake. However, just before that moment, he chose to reveal his intentions to her. Belle could hardly believe it when she found out that was planning to meet Parad, the legendary Sword King. Considered among the 10 legendary figures. Announces his decision to participate in the martial arts tournament. Remarks on how tasty the bread in his hand is, and speculates about whether Parad will personally present the prize to the champion. Belle nodded in agreement, though concern clouded her expression as she clarified that the tournament brought together talented newcomers from many places, making it a serious and challenging event. Calmly explains that his need to win stems from this very reason. Bell, puzzled, questions inwardly how he can state it so matter-of-factly and even wonders whether he's able to enjoy the taste of his meal. Tried to calm her nerves, promising that she had nothing to fear. He confidently explained that he would strive to reach the top by relying on his unique skill, but his words only left her more confused. When inquired about her plans to eat, she responded by saying she wasn't hungry. The long-awaited day of the martial arts tournament finally dawns. The leader of the tournament greeted the newcomers warmly. He informs everyone that the tournament is set to start as soon as he leaves the stage, warning them that they will soon have to confront monsters. He reminds everyone that even if King Parade is out of sight, his presence is still felt, and they should act with utmost respect knowing the king is observing them. He offered his well wishes to the group, just as a system notification appeared to declare the beginning of the tournament. Inside the arena, the contestants confronted the terrifying beasts. The initial challenge required the group to endure the golem's assault for an entire hour. The contestants eagerly charge into the fight, and among them, someone anticipates that their first challenger will be a golem. A translucent system window appeared before the contestants, revealing the details of the tournament's opening challenge. It declared that the participant who defeated the level 109 stone golem would earn a special prize. One of the participants stared at the golem in astonishment, questioning whether its level had always been this high. The participant recalled that the first round was meant to be simple, making the golem's strength seem even more unexpected. Another contestant rushed forward without hesitation, boldly announcing that whoever arrived first would have the advantage. However, the golem swiftly overpowers him, causing him to be forcibly logged out of the game. The rest of the competitors shrieked in fear and desperately attempted to evade the assaults, yet each was struck down in turn and forced out of the game. The participants shrieked in fear as they understood that the reality before them was nothing like what they had been told. Confusion and panic filled their minds as they tried to figure out how they could possibly overcome the monstrous challenge in front of them. Watched the scene unfold, noticing the frustration on the other players' faces as they understood they had been tricked and began to grumble about their misfortune. At the same time, the head of the tournament comes to the troubling realization that the event has descended into utter chaos. By accident, a stone golem intended for the advanced tournament had been included. Beck grows increasingly worried that every competitor in the tournament might soon be gone, so he resolves to seek an urgent audience with His Majesty without delay. Beck burst into the king's chamber, urgently calling out to the ruler and insisting that the tournament needed to be halted immediately. King Parrot, however, remains composed and turns down the request without hesitation. Beck looked bewildered and tried to ask a question, but the king cut him off, questioning whether Beck still failed to grasp what was happening. The king instructs him to pay careful attention. The focus shifted toward the warrior. Inside the arena, released an arrow shimmering with light, striking the stone golem directly. It becomes clear that this marks the third time has crafted a custom creation. There was a unique arrow, crafted with the remarkable power to find its way back to its owner each time it was released. The other players stared in disbelief, their minds racing as they tried to comprehend how an arrow could possibly circle back like a boomerang. Believes the arrow he holds is the prize he received after leaving the region. It was remarkable that the object was crafted from the fabled metal, living up to all expectations with its impressive performance. Released another arrow, which struck the golem with precision. As the arrow flew back, it almost struck another player. The startled player shouted at, warning him to be more cautious unless he intended to cause harm. Quickly apologized for his mistake. The powerful blow left the stone golem dazed and unable to move for 4 seconds. The players loudly announced that the golem had been stunned. They realized this moment presented an opportunity for them to launch an attack. The players attacked with everything they had, yet the golem managed to regain its strength and let out an enraged roar. The creature launched a fierce assault, prompting the players to cry out and alert one another to the danger. The golem, still caught in its wild frenzy, moved in the direction of. One player urged everyone to hang in there, insisting that it would all be over soon, while another called out to, desperately telling him to run. The players endure the blow, fighting desperately to survive. Just before it was too late, replaced his current weapon with the daylight sword. The character insisted that things were far from finished. He raises his arms just in time, stopping the golem's powerful strike. The powerful blow knocked him off his feet, sending him crashing to the ground. Beck urgently appealed to King Parad to halt the tournament, emphasizing that the contestant appeared to have reached his breaking point. The king observes intently when an unforeseen event suddenly draws his focus. Inside the arena, found himself on the ground, yet he summoned the emergency god crafting skill once more. The process of crafting comes to an end. This led to the creation of the Damascus wool do, a tool expertly crafted to slice effortlessly through solid rock. With one decisive blow, managed to bring down the stone golem. The Damascus vanished, having only existed as a temporary measure in a crisis, while screen quickly filled with notifications announcing his level-ups. Stared in astonishment as he noticed his level had risen by 14. Meanwhile, the other players watched him with wide eyes, struggling to comprehend how he had managed to overcome the challenge. Looked at the others, puzzled, and wondered aloud if they were not meant to destroy the creature. The players explained that their objective was simply to stay alive, questioning how anyone could possibly overcome a monster with such a massive difference in strength. The group revealed that the trial was made up of 3 distinct phases, but the sudden arrival of the golem had already thrown everything off course. That creature wasn't meant to be overcome. Realizing this, finally grasped what was really happening. Without warning, a wave of intense dizziness sweeps over, and he collapses as everything goes black. The rest of the players clustered around him, curious to see if he had lost consciousness, and soon realized that he was still connected to the game. The group began to talk about the number of weapons he had handled, first believing he was simply talented in many areas. As they thought more about it, they understood he was actually a master of weapons, and they found themselves wishing they could own even one of his incredible arms. At that moment, Beck informs everyone present that a mistake made by the organizers has led to the suspension of the martial arts tournament. The character demands that everyone vacate the area. Word of his accomplishment quickly circulates across the internet, as countless viewers tune in to a live broadcast showing him lying unconscious in the arena. Spectators questioned how he was able to overcome the stone golem without any help, showing curiosity about the weapons he used, especially his bow and arrow. As they examined the scene more closely, one person pointed out an arrow lying on the ground that had left behind, and when they looked at it in detail, they discovered the name carved into its surface. The audience quickly associates him with the one responsible for crafting the irreparable bell found in the region. The group stood in shock, unable to comprehend how a blacksmith possessed such incredible strength, and they gazed in awe at the remarkable quality of his gear. Inside the Beholder Company headquarters, the customer service team struggled to manage an overwhelming number of questions regarding the abrupt halt of the tournament. Unable to offer detailed explanations, the employees could only repeat that the suspension had been a choice made independently by Ares. It could also be connected to a problem occurring within the borders of the Kingdom of. They continuously expressed regret to the customers. Within the development department, the employee approached her team leader to inform him about a serious issue, but the team leader responded by saying he was occupied at the moment. She lets him know that the martial arts tournament has been put on hold, and he responds casually, acting as if they had already expected this outcome. The employee raised their voice, insisting that the real issue was not what had been discussed, but rather that King Parade had called upon the user named. The team leader stared in disbelief, struggling to understand how a meeting could happen so soon when preparations for the tournament were still. Meanwhile, the employee assured the leader that was already heading towards the reception hall. The team leader suddenly understands that he is facing a difficult situation and will have to spend yet another night working late. He observes that the user's behavior makes no sense and cannot be anticipated. He begins to speculate about the possible outcomes if manages to fulfill Parrot's request and their relationship reaches its highest point. He reasons that, if this happens, will fully learn the Sword King's techniques and rise to become the greatest blacksmith of all time. The leader of the developer team pointed out that the task would be challenging, since the outcome depended entirely on Parade's own choice. A coworker then admitted she had a hunch that would pull it off, which made the team leader uneasy and prompted him to ask her to avoid making such unsettling remarks. The following day within the game world, found himself being led toward the throne room, realizing that his encounter with Parade would happen much earlier than he had anticipated. Dropped to his knees in front of King Parade, who referred to him as a stranger. Parade clarified that under usual circumstances, the prize would have been awarded in front of the whole crowd. However, because of the unplanned event, he hoped for understanding as they chose a simpler approach. He confidently asserts that his exceptional skills as a weapon master, demonstrated the previous day, will earn him recognition from everyone. The king decided to reward, with a generous sum of 13,000 gold pieces. Abruptly rose to his feet, cutting off the king's words. He respectfully addressed the monarch, explaining that he had heard the king was searching for him. The king's guards bristled with anger at his disrespect, convinced that no amount of skill could excuse such boldness. They could not fathom how he found the nerve to speak before the king had completed his words. Introduced himself with composure, stating that he was the blacksmith. Hearing this, the guards became even more furious and got ready to force him out without delay. King Parade halted the group, announcing that was the awaited guest. Offered a respectful greeting to King Parade. Parade, counted among the 10 legends who serve Ares, remarks to him that he certainly did not hurry. Explained that the journey to this place had been difficult. Parade then questioned whether he understood the reason for being called here. Ha suspects that the purpose is to request his skills in crafting a sword, and the king affirms his assumption. Parade mentions that not even the kingdom's top blacksmith or tank, the renowned master of the sword tower, have succeeded in accomplishing this challenge. Because of this, he feels curious about the qualities that make someone he can rely on. Feeling the weight of the situation, admits that there is just a single thing in his possession. He had traveled this far, relying solely on his own abilities and trusting nothing else. King Parade burst into laughter, clearly entertained by how daring the stranger was. The king, intrigued by self-assurance, chose to take a chance on him and commanded his guards to fetch the item had arranged. Before a radiant chest appeared, bathed in a soft, shimmering light. Inside the chest lay a rare ore known as 100-year-old cold iron, which had spent a century soaking in cold, and now held both resistance to fire and the qualities of ice. Stared at the metal with wide eyes, marveling at how it resembled something from a legendary martial arts tale. Parade made his wishes clear, explaining that he was searching for an item of at least epic grade, one that radiated a chilling frost. He assured the other person that, should the item meet his expectations, he would fulfill any wish in return. He cautions that any disappointment would mean a permanent ban from ever returning to the kingdom of. A notification box suddenly popped up, signaling the start of a new mission. The task was named the King's Commission, a challenge that could only proceed with the king's personal approval. Success promised a single wish granted by Parade, while failure meant being banished from the kingdom of. Agreed to take on the quest, assuring the king of his determination not to let him down and expressing his confidence in achieving success. Inside the blacksmith's workshop, became acutely aware of a piercing stare fixed on him, making the skin on his neck tingle with discomfort. He notices a woman observing him from nearby. She is identified as Bella, who holds the position of vice captain among the knights of the kingdom of, and her rank is an impressive level 301. Silently reflects on the situation, feeling that assigning a guard to watch over him so openly seems a bit much for someone they barely know. However, he quickly dismisses this feeling, reasoning that it makes sense for the others to be cautious and wary of trusting him right away. Bella instructed to act as if she were invisible and concentrate on his tasks. With a smirk hinting at sarcasm, questioned whether his glances at her were really so noticeable, to which Bella confirmed that they were. Bella wondered to herself about the identity of this young man, recalling that His Highness had entrusted them with his final hope, and silently promised that he must not let them down. Senses the overwhelming expectations she has placed upon him. Without warning, the sound of a doorbell echoed through the game, leaving confused. Realizing something unusual was happening outside the game, he quickly expressed his regret to Bella and told her that an event in his actual life might need his attention. He wonders aloud whether she would be okay with him leaving the room for a short while. Emerged from his capsule in the real world, then walked over to open the door. He did not expect to encounter the landlady. Wanted to know why she had come to see him. The woman informed him of her choice to put the house up for sale, mentioning that her husband had lost his job not long ago and they needed to address their situation. She also expressed her apologies to him, insisted that she shouldn't apologize, believing that he was the one at fault for paying less than the usual rent and for his repeated delays in making payments. He wanted to know her preferred timeline for his departure, and she informed him that he would have to move out in 2 weeks. The woman's face flushes with embarrassment as she stands before him, yet he gently urges her not to express such feelings. He reassures her that his life in this place has been good, and with genuine respect, he bows in her direction. Once she was gone, quietly reminded himself that he had only 2 weeks until the deadline. His weariness weighed heavily on him. Despite the decent earnings he had accumulated in Ares, fatigue continued to linger. His father's medical expenses amounted to tens of millions, and reclaiming the destroyed workshop set him back over $33 million. He still has not begun treating his burns, and hopelessness fills him as he tries to figure out where he should turn next. Just then his phone began to ring, and the name displayed on the screen was also known as Bell. When he picked up the phone, Bell inquired about his current activity and explained that she had called because she had come up with a promising idea for their quest. Requested that she return his call at a later time, mentioning that his mind was currently occupied with other matters. Sensing his distraction, Bell inquired if anything was troubling him. Explained to her that Parrot's mission held great significance, yet he abruptly faced the need to leave his home within a fortnight. Bell, with frustration evident in her voice, emphasizes to him just how crucial this mission is. She explains to him that she anticipates 2 primary results from the situation. Bell shared that there was an ongoing debate about whether the winner of the martial arts tournament and the blacksmith named were actually one and the same individual. She advises him to keep his intentions hidden for now, believing that when he finally shares his decision, it will make a huge impact. She mentions that he was tasked with crafting a sword by Parrot, who stands among the most powerful NPCs in Ares. She urges him to picture the moment when Parade unveils a newly forged sword, its blade bearing the name. At that point his worth would soar, so she promised to remain by his side. Expressed his gratitude to her, acknowledging that she had helped him regain his clarity, and vowed to put forth his best effort. Re-entered the game and immediately noticed Bella, who was glaring at him with frustration and raising her voice in anger. Bella raised her voice demanding to know the reason for his late return, while clearly puzzled, wondered aloud about what had occurred. Bella informed him that the person in question was His Royal Highness, Parrot. The character found themselves confined within the dragon's lair. Visibly startled, urgently wonders about the location where King Parrot is being held captive. Then inquires about the precise whereabouts of the dragon's nest. Bella, clearly astonished, questions how he can possibly feign surprise when he doesn't even know its location. Admits he just figured it was best to at least pretend to be shocked. Bella warned him that there was not much time left. She promptly provides an explanation, making it clear that Flame Nest refers to the area where fire-type monsters are commonly found. Among these places stands the dungeon, known as a deadly labyrinth from which only King Parrot has ever emerged alive. Found it puzzling that the king would return to a dungeon he had already explored, particularly when the weapon had been asked to create was still unfinished. Bella explained that the reason was because the person His Majesty sought revenge against could be found there. Reacts with shock upon realizing that he has become the focus of someone's vengeance. The setting transitions to the heart of the Flame Nest. King Parrot appeared, clearly weakened and wounded from his recent injuries. He gazes at the gate standing in front of him, understanding that crossing its threshold will set everything in motion. He doubts that his present sword has the strength he needs. He experiences a sense of relief, knowing his team managed to get away unharmed. He realizes that help won't reach them for another 3 days at the earliest. He forces a rueful smile, conceding to himself that maybe he ought to have let the stranger complete the sword before acting. A wave of sorrow washed over him as he remembered the past, longing deeply for his son Ban, who was no longer there. He recalled that his son had been a round sage. The memory of holding his son as he passed away, crying out for his father, haunted him. Within that distressing recollection, Parrot questioned his son about arriving without informing him first. Ban explained that he believed overcoming the dungeon would make him into a son worthy of his father's pride. He came to understand that he had lacked the strength before, and he expressed his regret for it. Parrot raised his voice at his son, insisting that apologies were unnecessary and urging him to cling tightly to life. Ban, however, offers his father another apology. He takes his final breath while being held in his arms. Parade knelt beside the motionless form, overcome with grief as he held the body close, sorrow flooding his heart. In the current moment, Parade realizes that waiting for the stranger to hand over the sword might have been the wiser choice. However, he knows he must prevent from getting away. For years, he had been anticipating the other's arrival, his resolve unwavering in his mission to destroy him. Parade moved forward with determination, heading straight for the fiery entrance of the dungeon. Bella reveals that after the prince passed away, the king exhausted all possible methods to capture, yet managed to keep himself hidden and avoid capture. She mentions that this could be the king's final opportunity. Bella openly confesses her struggle to place her trust in someone as unfamiliar as. She goes on to say that there must be a purpose behind His Majesty, choosing to trust him with this responsibility. Bella lowered herself into a respectful bow before him, her posture reflecting her role as a knight of the kingdom of. With earnest desperation, she pleaded for him to rescue the king. A sudden emergency quest emerged, bearing the title A Sword That Can Save the King. To complete it, the challenge demanded that Bella's request be accepted. Succeeding would earn more of her trust, but failure would result in Parade losing his life. The task at hand was to create a sword powerful enough to rescue him. Reflects on the sorrowful events that shaped Parade's life. He recalls that on that fateful day, he nearly lost all that mattered to him in the fire. He questioned whether he would have been able to move forward if he had experienced a loss similar to Parade's. He assured Bella with determination that he would do whatever it took to help. Wasted no time before diving into work at the workshop, striking the metal with vigor and a clear sense of excitement. The object was then submerged in water. He recalls hearing that flames are powerful enough to liquefy even the strongest, most exceptional weapons. He decides that crafting a weapon of even greater quality than the unique grade is necessary. He chooses to concentrate on the impact of the frozen stone, realizing that it presents an impossible challenge. While he continued his work, a system notification popped up, informing him that his knowledge of the century-old cold iron had grown more profound. A new message popped up, revealing that the blacksmith's spirit had now awakened. The message reveals that, during the creation of this blade, dedicated himself to the task with greater intensity and focus than anyone around him. Fueled by his intense passion, unwavering determination, and deep sense of empathy, he found himself utterly absorbed in his task. As a consequence, the system reveals that is in the process of crafting his very first sword of legendary quality. A glowing light spills out from the workshop, prompting Bella to question whether the project has finally reached completion. Grip the newly radiant sword, its glow casting a soft light around him. He announces that the moment has come to rescue His Majesty, King Parade. At the same time, inside the fiery nest, Parade cries out in agony after being struck with great force. He drops to his knees, his resolve unwavering as he decides that today will be the day he finishes this. The formidable leader of the flame nest, and a powerful being of level 409, emerged to confront him. Parade called out loudly, his voice echoing as he cried's name. The person dismisses him with a scoff, insisting that he is completely clueless. He had spent a long time waiting for the chance to meet him. The two opponents rushed toward one another, clashing in a fierce and unforgettable confrontation. Unleashed a thunderous roar that echoed all around. The intense clash raged on as King Parade, and fought with unwavering determination. Parade stepped forward, positioning themselves between and the others, effectively shielding everyone from the torrent of blazing strikes unleashed by. However, the sheer force of his power proves too much for him to handle. Parade's eyes widened in astonishment, as he noticed that sword was made entirely out of blazing fire. A relentless barrage of powerful strikes rains down on him, leaving him unable to defend himself. Let out a victorious yell, his voice echoing with excitement. He released a surge of fire, sending a powerful wave of flames outward. Parade recoiled in agony, compelled to withdraw from the confrontation. Let out a triumphant laugh. Parade dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by a sense of defeat, and muttered bitter complaints about the circumstances, certain that everything had ended in failure. Himself poised to strike with what would be the decisive attack. He hurled his spear in Parade's direction. Out of thin air, an enormous sword made of ice materialized, intercepting assault before it could land. And Bella managed to reach the scene right before it was too late. Bella raised her voice at King Pered, urging him to wield the newly acquired sword. Pered reached out and picked up the newly arrived sword, its blade shining with a brilliant glow in front of him. System notification popped up, showcasing the specifications of this legendary custom sword made for Pered. The weapon boasted extraordinary abilities, including an impressive 343% boost in resistance to fire, a 194% increase in attack power with ice, and an enormous 397% enhancement to ice attacks specifically targeting fire-type monsters. Additionally, the sword featured an active ability known as Frost Flower. Requested that the king attempt to wield the weapon. Pered wrapped his hand around the sword's hilt, causing it to shine with a frosty light. Pered activated the skill, sending a wave of icy energy outward. A powerful surge of ice surged over the battlefield, instantly turning blazing assaults into frozen sculptures. Howled in agony when the sword's freezing magic clashed against its fiery strength. The parade announces its conclusion. Pered surged ahead, driving his frigid blade into its blazing form, causing the sword to break apart upon impact. Reels in astonishment as Pered relentlessly presses on with his assault. Pered managed to land a powerful final attack, bringing to defeat. A notification appears, informing him that the boss monster has been vanquished. Pered let out a relieved breath, convinced that success was finally within reach. Without warning, his body started to radiate a brilliant light before erupting in a powerful explosion. Found himself puzzled by the unfolding events, uncertain about what was transpiring. At the same moment, Bella came to the understanding that certain monsters would detonate on their own just before reaching death. Pered becomes trapped as a tremendous blast engulfs the dungeon, reducing everything inside to ruins. Bella urgently shouted at King Pered, insisting that he leave right away because of the looming danger. However, Pered firmly instructed her to remain where she was, declaring it a command from the king himself. He gazes at a locket containing a photo of his son, his mind filled with the desire to finish everything in this place. Bella's heart sinks with despair, yet determination flickers within her as she realizes that the responsibility of rescuing the king rests on her shoulders. Although he had told her to stay away, she found herself uncertain and puzzled about her next move. Moved ahead by himself, he informs her of his intention to leave and fetch His Majesty. He activates his emergency god crafting ability, skillfully forging a shield designed to withstand intense flames. Stepped into the heart of the raging fire. He raised his voice, summoning the presence of King Pered. The king instructed him to return, believing he had already fulfilled more than what was expected of him. Stood his ground, making it clear that he had come to stay by his side, and had no intention of leaving. Wonders aloud if the choice was influenced by the individual pictured inside the locket. The king nodded solemnly, confessing that his actions had led to his son's death. He questions how he can go on living, uncertain of the expression he should wear. Wondered aloud whether the individual depicted in the locket would approve of the current situation. Pered's anger boiled over as he glared at, insisting with a raised voice that should remain silent, for no one else could ever understand the emotions he was experiencing. She carried the sorrow of having lost her child because of his actions. Pered seized by the collar, his voice rising in anger as he demanded to know how could even bring up the subject. In response, confessed that he could never truly understand this particular kind of pain. He explained that he had nearly lost someone close as well, sharing the truth that his own father lay unconscious in a coma. Explained to the king that he once prayed daily for his father to regain consciousness, but now he simply felt grateful that his father was still alive, regardless of his condition. He expresses confidence that the son must experience similar emotions as well. Pered wrapped his arms around, comforting him while he pleaded for his son to be allowed to rest peacefully. The king envisions his son's joyful face and finds himself uttering apologies to him over and over again. Leaned in close, softly urging him to keep fighting for his life, while silently acknowledging to himself that his father's mistakes had led them here. He wonders aloud if the man should strive to be the kind of father his son could admire. King Pered nodded in agreement, expressing that he did not want to be a disgraceful father. King Pered smiled warmly, signaling that it was time for him to leave. They step out from the burning ruins as the fire crumbles behind them. Bella hurried over to the group, her voice filled with concern as she called out to ask if the king was unharmed. Quickly calmed her worries by letting her know that the king was safe. He informed her that he would return shortly. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, stating that his health had dropped to 0 and he would be automatically logged out. Before vanishing, comforted her by explaining that unknown players couldn't die. Bella stared in disbelief as King Parrot fell into her embrace, murmuring softly that the boy had rescued him. Bella called out to the king with urgency, urging him to wake up and come back to his senses. Parrot's lips curled into a gentle smile as he slipped into unconsciousness. Meanwhile, opened his eyes in the real world just as a notification flashed before him, informing him that his level had dropped by 1 because of a forced logout. With tears welling in his eyes, he gazes down at his hands, wrapped tightly in bandages, and silently promises his father that he will keep moving forward.